Hello and welcome to the Pupillage application webinar. We are delighted to have you along. My name is Emily Formby and I am one of the heads of the Pupillage committee. And I have just stopped having pupils myself, but since I've been in Chambers in 2010, I've had pupils every single year. We're joined today by a great group of members of Chambers of all ages and stages and different roles to talk to you today about joining us, and we hope that today will give you the sort of information you need both to help you decide to come to our brilliant chambers and also to feel comfortable in making that application. What we are doing now is hopefully helping you because the Pupillage Gateway is open, and we know that it can be quite a hideous process trying to work your way through the gateway and work your way through the whole application process. So what we really want to do today is help you by answering questions you might have and to give you the opportunity to get a feeling for what we're like as Chambers, a bit of a better understanding of who we are, what we offer, what we do, and whether you might want to apply to join us. We hope you do. And if you do, how best to do that. So what I'm going to do is chair today, which basically means I'll be around lurking in the background and talking from time to time, hopefully keeping things running smoothly. What I'm going to do when each person talks, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, give us a little bit of a sense of what their journey to the bar has been, to hopefully show you there are many, many routes to, I was going to say to glory, that might not be the right word, to joining us, and telling us a little bit about themselves, and then to talk on a variety of topics. What we'll also do going through the day, you should see there's a sidebar open for any questions you might want to ask. If you do type them there, and I will try and make sure that we get to them during the course of the afternoon. If we don't, we'll certainly make sure that we respond subsequently. And if there are any other questions as well, you're free to email them in to us later. So that's pretty much how we're going to go. The afternoon will last from now until about 5:30 this afternoon, and we're going to cover a wide range of topics that we hope will be of interest to you. So just, I guess, to be true to the course, I'll tell you about myself. I'm Emily Formby, as I say, and currently head of the Pupillage committee with other people, and very involved in all of our recruitment and training process, because I passionately believe in helping people to make the best of their career and the best of themselves. And in fact, I wanted to be a teacher before I became a lawyer, so it suits me to do both. My journey to the bar was pretty torturous. I don't really think I still know very much law. I did a history degree, then had a disastrous stint working in public relations, when basically I learned I wasn't very good at selling things to people, and then started to work both in teaching and thought law, worked in a solicitor's and as an outdoor clerk and a receptionist in a legal firm for a bit. And finally, one day wandered into a Chambers and suddenly thought, gosh, this is a fantastic environment where I feel at last able to be myself. And one interesting thing about me, well, I don't think there is anything very interesting about me. I was going to say I've got a cockapoo, but that doesn't really strike me as anything interesting. It probably makes me like 90% of people in the world, as far as I can tell. Anyway, what I can do is hopefully move you forward to the first of our really interesting people to talk to you, which is Vikram, Victoria and Celia, who are going to talk to you about our practice areas, because one of the things we do in Chambers is have distinct practice areas, and as pupils we want you to really get a good understanding of what we do and how we do it. So they're going to talk about practice, culture and ethos, and I'm delighted to welcome you and them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Emily. I am very glad to be presenting this session with Celia and Tor. Welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure to have your attention this afternoon. It is a difficult decision to decide which chambers to apply to and which offer to accept if you're lucky enough to have an offer or more than one offer. If there's one lesson from this afternoon I'd like to pass on, it's from a famous science fiction book from my childhood. It was printed in friendly pink letters on the outside, and the message it gave was, don't panic. So whatever happens, don't worry, something will work out. You just need to buckle up and get ready for the ride. And if you're determined, something good will happen. And the advice in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is equally valid now, I think. So we're aiming to help you with that decision this afternoon. And as I've said, we've got Celia and Tor to speak to you before me. So I'd like to, without further ado, hand over to Celia. Over to you, Celia.
Hi, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Celia, as introduced, and by way of background, I've studied law in Ireland first, before completing a master's in the US, and then decided to move to the UK here. And I recently completed Pupillage in Chambers in September and was thankfully offered tenancy afterwards. I understand that straight after this talk, you will be hearing from our current pupils, as well as Chiara and Daniel, about life as a junior tenant. But by way of a brief overview, just to give an impression of what the culture and ethos is like in Chambers today. I mean, I can really say that for every day that I'm here, I continue to be grateful that 39 Essex is both where I completed my pupillage and where I've had the opportunity to begin my career as a barrister. It will be said, I'm sure, by many Chambers, but I find that it is quite true that here, Chambers is incredibly friendly. It's really quite approachable. And if you come here, you'll find that members really take an active effort to find out who you are, to get to know you. They'll often stop you in the corridor just to introduce themselves. I think I have countless days where people just knock on my door just to get to know me. And that's not something you'll necessarily find everywhere. So while pupillage was and will always be somewhat of a daunting experience, I certainly found that Chambers takes a lot of steps to make sure that you do feel comfortable and welcome, which I think is quite great. I'm sure Daniel and Chiara will touch on this, so I won't speak on it for too long, but it should really be quite emphasized how unique Chambers is for having a lot of specialisms across a wide variety of practices, because 39 is really quite good at a lot of areas. And that's obviously quite visible when you look at the more senior members of our Chambers, but it should be emphasized how much that really does benefit the junior end, and how there's really great opportunities to get involved in high quality and high profile work early on. Certainly during my transition from pupil to junior tenant, I've been really encouraged to consider, you know, what areas of the law I want to work in, where I want to focus, any new areas that I want to try. And I know all the clerks reach out and ask and take an interest in what I want to do, which is quite great. And say, for example, when I began, I suggested that I wanted to work in an inquiry, having seen that there are many members of our Chambers involved in really high profile inquiries. And within the first few weeks of my life as a junior tenant, I was instructed in the COVID inquiry. And that's solely because I expressed this interest, which my clerks listened to and responded to. And generally, if you come here, you'll find yourself bombarded with opportunities to increase your professional presence and take on really interesting work. I suppose that's sort of the overview that I would give you, that this is a really great Chambers to come to, and I would actively encourage you to consider applying.
Thanks very much, Celia. Over to you, Tor.
Thanks, Vikram. Hi, everyone. I am Tor Butler-Cole. I was called in 2005, by which time I'd already had various other jobs and hadn't decided I wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I'm not actually sure I decided I wanted to be a lawyer until I'd got partway through my pupillage, to be honest. I did my pupillage at 39 Essex, and I'm still here, although you can't tell from my background, but I'm actually in Devon, which is where I live. And one of the things that I have found to be fabulous about Chambers, and which I would encourage you to think about when you look at which Chambers you are applying to, is that it really makes a difference to your quality of life if your chambers is one that supports flexible working, supports people with families, people with caring responsibilities and things like that. And I didn't think about that at all in 2005. I had no idea that was kind of an important factor, because at the time when you're applying, or at least when I was applying, my overriding consideration was just, please, someone give me a pupillage, I don't really care who it is. And so the idea that I would sort of pick and choose between chambers and say, well, I think I'd rather go here than there, it was a bit laughable, because really I just thought, I'll go anywhere, please, someone just give me a job. So, but it is actually important, because chances are, if you do pupillage at 39 or anywhere else, you'll be taken on. And so then you are that you hadn't thought about and you don't actually like, that's a bit annoying. So I effectively have worked part-time for about 10 years because I've got 2 children and I try not to work in the school holidays. And there are not very many jobs where you can do that. And there are not very many chambers where you can do it actually either, because even though it's 2024 now, there are still places where that sort of flexibility is not embraced, and where parents, whether men or women, are not quite so actively encouraged to have a work-life balance that is the one that's right for them. So that's an important thing. And it sort of feeds into the general ethos in chambers, and just the fact that people are interesting, different, have different lives, do different things, but are all supportive of each other. And it really does feel like a place where whoever you are, you can be part of the community and can do the things that you want to do. And so you can spend years here and become an expert in a very specialist area of law, or you can do a whole range of things and have a really broad practice. You can work full-time every hour of the day if you really want to, or you can have a slightly more civilized lifestyle. You can decide you want to become a part-time judge, which is one of the things that I've done. There's all sorts of other stuff you can do. You can train as a mediator. There's so much variety and so much interesting stuff going on, that the thing that prompted me to decide to come about it in the first place, which was being bored with what else I was doing, has meant that it's really true to say that there's never been a day when I've been bored. There have been days when I've thought, I'm tired, I've had enough, but there hasn't really been a day when I've thought I'm actually bored and this work isn't interesting and there isn't something that I want to do, or someone I want to talk to about it. So even though it's a long time ago that I applied, it's really nice to hear Celia talking about it, because it actually sounds really similar, and that's reassuring as well, that the sort of commitment that Chambers has always had to making pupillage an enjoyable experience and making sure that junior tenants get interesting work and that people enjoy being here is sort of still as strong as it ever was. So the last thing I'm going to say is, have a look at, when you're this Chambers or any other, have a look at the website. If there are people on that website who you look at and you read their CV, factoring in that it's made to sound as great as it possibly could, but if you look at it and you think, God, that person's job sounds really interesting, I would like to have their job. If there's a couple of people like that in Chambers, then apply here. Even if those people don't look like you, they don't have the same background as you, don't worry about it. If there's someone here or a couple of people here where you think, yeah, I'd like to do that work, then go for it, put in the application, and hopefully we will see you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tor. Well, I'm Vikram Sachdeva. I'm a Silk and a Deputy High Court Judge. And I've got 6 points for you, very brief ones, just to hang on to. The first one is that we act in some of the biggest cases around. Last year, we acted in the Rwanda case in the Supreme Court, for instance. We were also involved, for instance, in the Miller 2 case, the one about the prorogation of Parliament. We are in 2 of the lawyers, I think, 10 biggest cases of 2024. In the past, we've had 2 Treasury devils, so the government's most senior barrister, and 2 Supreme Court judges, including Lord Dyson, who was also Master of the Rolls, and he's still working away in Chambers very assiduously. So we act in big cases. We're, as I think has been discussed, an exceptionally broad specialist chambers. One directory, Chambers and Partners, lists us as having the 2nd highest number of Chambers rankings, that's 21, nationally, and we actively market in all of these areas and can help you develop your practice in those areas. So if you want to practice in more than one field, that's a distinct advantage. And I know that at this stage, not all of you will know exactly what you want to practice in. So if there are various fields you can go into, that's an obvious advantage. The third point is, and this is an advantage to some and a disadvantage to others, we are large. We're nearly 200 tenants. So to some, that will be a disadvantage because it means that you're a smaller cog in a bigger machine. But in truth, the way 39 works is really in terms of its groups. It's an amalgam of a number of smaller groups, and it's quite easy to get to know people in those smaller groups that you practice in. And to others, it is an advantage because it should, in theory, and I think does, give greater financial stability if you're working within a larger chambers, because it doesn't depend on a smaller number of higher earners for the chambers to do well. Point 4, we're extremely collegiate. I think you've heard about this already. We are, to all of us, everyone is important in chambers. It's not hierarchical. Where there are disagreements, and I find this very striking, because I'm afraid to say, when you put lawyers together, sometimes you do get disagreements. That may surprise you. But what surprises me constantly in chambers is just how civilized the discussions are, even if they are diametrically opposed in view. It's extremely interesting how very decently everyone behaves, and that's a particular aspect of the culture in these chambers. Then professionally, it's also very supportive. If one emails a question around, typically you'll get 5 answers within 5 minutes or 10 minutes in a very short time, and they will help you find your way to the answer. So if you're in court, for instance, judge asks you a nasty question, and you can manage to get to your computer without the judge noticing, or the judge is okay with that, then you might just get the answer almost as you're speaking. And it's really, that's certainly happened to me in circumstances when I didn't have a clue what the answer was. So that means a lot. And then socially, it's very supportive. In a place as big as this, you will find people you get on very well with, and you will make some close friends among your colleagues and socialize with them. That's point 4, collegiate. Point 5, international work. We do a significant amount of international work across Asia and indeed across the world. And we have offices in Singapore and in Kuala Lumpur, but we work in all sorts of other countries as well. I should also mention we've got an office in Manchester, which is a very popular one. We do a lot of work up there too, but obviously that's the same country. The 6th and final point is, and this is possibly the best news of all, if you get offered a pupillage in chambers, that does mean that we're intending to recruit you. The numbers back this assertion up. That it's not a guarantee that you'll be taken on, but since 2010, I'm told, we've had 35 completed pupillages, and we've taken on 31 of these people. And of the 4 we didn't take on, 3 are in successful practice elsewhere. So it's a good sign if you get offered a pupillage, and it's certainly made in good faith with a view to being taken on if you satisfy the tests that are set for you. Just a little bit about my own story. I had interest when I was a pupil in commercial, public and medical law, and that's quite an odd combination. Very few chambers do all 3. And I came as a third 6, having done a pupillage in the public law chambers and also in the commercial chambers, and I've stayed for over 20 years. I've got a very broad practice, from commercial to a tax case in the Court of Appeal worth $1 billion, to regulatory law, a lot of judicial review and human rights cases, Supreme Court ones about student loans, done a number of medical cases about life and death, including all the Supreme Court cases in the field, and also the Salisbury poisoning case. But each day there's something new, as Tor says, and it's very difficult to get bored here. Basically, I recommend the experience highly. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much,
That's it from
Vikram.
Celia and Tor. So
Yeah.
thank you very much. Over to you.
Vikram. Vikram, just one question. You were talking about the international offices, and obviously we've got offices in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. In terms of how members are taking on a lot of work there at a junior level, it's right, isn't it, that people can start working there as soon as they are able to. There's no people start working quite junior level out there, don't they?
They do, yes. Well, we have
I mean, I'm rambling slightly because it's not my field of expertise, but I'm just hoping that you might be able to answer that question.
No.
Had asked.
We do a good line in offering secondments to major law firms in Singapore, and they work in our office and also in a law firm's office. So, and that can happen almost immediately on being taken on. So
excellent. Certainly
that's encouraged at all stages.
Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful. And you will have picked up when Vikram, Tor and Celia have been talking about the various areas in Chambers. We'll come on to it when we talk about the structure of pupillage, but we structure pupillage so that the 4 main groups that we have in Chambers, you will have a seat in each of those groups during your pupillage. So you can't avoid getting to know the breadth of our practice. But we'll talk about that a little more in detail, and also a bit more about how to turn your pupillage into tenancy. As Vikram's told you, there's a very high success rate for that. But again, what that exactly looks like, we'll tell you a little bit more about. But now you can see lined up, ready to tell you all about it. We have life as a pupil at 39 Essex Chambers, and I'm delighted to say we've got all our current pupils ready to talk to you. So I will hand over to them. Thank you very much.
Can you hear us? Brilliant.
Perfectly.
Thank you. I'm Samuel, and just to introduce myself very briefly, I studied languages at university, not law. Then went off to become a teacher, teaching French and English, and frankly anything else they wanted me to teach. Before COVID disrupted that, and I rethought things, and then retrained as a lawyer at City, doing the GDL and the bar course before coming here for pupillage. And I'm going to talk about the basic structure of pupillage before handing over to the others to talk about culture and training and assessment. So we have a normal 12-month pupillage here, which is structured around the 4 seats reflecting our 4 core practice areas, which are CLG, our civil liability group, broadly speaking, clinical negligence and personal injury, construction and commercial, planning and environmental and property law, and finally public law. And it's a real whistle-stop tour in those 12 months. You spend about 9 to 12 weeks in each of those seats, and they can really fly by. We're already reaching the end of our 2nd seat. A key distinguishing feature of pupillage at 39 is that you have a practicing 2nd 6. And I'm not sure whether some of the more recent tenants are going to talk about that, but that means that from March, us 3, and Daniel as well, will be on our feet in small civil claims, slips and trips, road traffic accidents, credit hire, and things like that. Santosh is going to talk to us about, or talk to you about in-house training, but as we're approaching being on our feet, we're getting more and more specialized training on the different types of cases we're going to face, as well as the kinds of skills that we need to develop in order to be ready for them. So you have 2 to 4 supervisors in each seat, and I think that has 3 really positive effects. The first is it takes some of the pressure off. It means you're not constantly training the same person, constantly working with the same person. Secondly, it gives you exposure to a whole load of different approaches to legal practice. You get to see how different practitioners, their style of advocacy, their approach to drafting advices, how they approach building their practice, managing workload and things like that. And finally, it gives you exposure to a really broad range of work within the seat. So for example, I'm currently in my construction and commercial seat, but as a result of the quite broad and eclectic practices of my supervisors, I've seen everything. I was just noting down everything from pure property and chancery work to large-scale construction disputes, international commercial disputes with jurisdiction, conflict of laws components, and commercial judicial review, some regulatory work, and even some planning and property work in another common law jurisdiction. So that's within one 12-week period. So you really get an incredible exposure to a variety of work. So broadly, life as a pupil has 3 distinct components: shadowing, written work, and in-house training, which Santosh is going to talk about. So the first component is the shadowing. And our supervisors work really, really hard to give us an insight, a representative insight into the variety of substantive work done in each seat. And we're very lucky as pupils at 39 to have that exposure. For example, and building on what Vikram was saying about getting exposure to the highest quality work as well. In my time in the civil liability group seat, I was spent time with my supervisor on the civil claims arising out of the Grenfell fire, as well as on the rugby claims against World Rugby and Rugby Football Union. And in CNC, I've seen some of the first cases arising out of some of the new jurisdictions in the Building Safety Act, as well as some interesting work at the Financial Ombudsman Service and so on. So just moving to written work then. That's roughly divided into two categories: live work, which is where essentially you're working in parallel with your supervisor doing the piece of work they've been instructed to do, and dead work, which are past cases where you're given a specific task, discrete task within that case to produce. Supervisors will control your workflow, which means that you only ever produce work for them, or if it is for other members of Chambers, your supervisors will have to give permission. That means you're not constantly being asked to do lots of different things by lots of different people. It's very carefully structured to ensure that, firstly, all pupils are doing similar amounts of work in each seat, and that you're not so jam-packed with work that you can't actually do anything properly. Broadly speaking, the main types of work you'll do in terms of written work are pleadings, advices. You can do some discrete research tasks on case law arising out of a particular case, grounds of appeal, skeleton arguments, injunctions, that kind of thing. But it really reflects the type of written work that particular seat is often engaged in. And just a final comment before I pass on to Monty. It's been an amazingly enjoyable, surprisingly enjoyable year. I think everyone that enters Pupillage imagining it's going to be a horribly stressful experience, and no doubt it has been. But it's also been remarkably enjoyable and fantastic and stimulating. So I'll hand over to Monty.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, so I'm Monty, also one of the pupils, started in September with Santosh and Sam. I studied philosophy at university, and then I worked in the civil service for a year or so before deciding to move across to the law. I started my law degree working part-time for an NGO, and now very lucky to find myself here at 39. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the way that pupillage is assessed and the way that you're given feedback. So the criteria against which you're assessed for pupillage is the same as that is used for pupillage applications. So that's first, intellectual ability; second, expressive ability; third, interpersonal skills; fourth, commitment, drive, and efficiency; five, interest in one or more areas of law in which Chambers specialises; and lastly, interest outside the law. Just to reassure everyone on that last one, we're not actually graded on that criteria. We are graded on the others. The last criteria is just to remind you that Chambers cares that you do have a work-life balance, and to ensure that you are doing things outside of your pupillage and not being all consumed by the law. So the main way which you're assessed against those criteria is the written work, which Sam has already mentioned. So all of the written work which you receive comes via your supervisor, or at least the vast majority of it. And as Sam said, that Chambers is very strict to ensure that pupils are not seen as sort of a floating work resource. Any work that you're given is controlled through your supervisor. And I think I've only done one very discreet research note for someone who wasn't my supervisor, and it was pre-approved by them. So as Sam has said, the work will take a combination of advices, pleadings, and research notes. The way it works, your supervisor will have a discussion with you about the piece of work, what they want you to do, make sure that you understand what your task is, and they'll probably send another email to you with the documents that you require for it and repeating any sort of instructions. And you also agree a deadline. And that deadline will range anywhere from 2 days to a week. Normally, they can be shorter, they can be longer, but I'd say that that's the average for most of them. And particularly at the beginning, supervisors are very flexible with the deadlines. You know, they're aware that you may have sort of difficulties at the beginning, getting your head around certain concepts. And so if you do need more time, they are more than happy to give it to you. I've also found that when you have things come into the diary at the last minute, so say you're sent to go and see someone at court, something interesting is coming up, you know, the deadline will move, and you're definitely not expected to stay up all night trying to meet a deadline that has been preset, and now something's come in the middle of it, and you're having to move around. I think Dan's going to speak about it a little bit more, but Chambers has a very strict 9 to 6 policy. And I definitely found that is taken into account when you're doing deadlines for pieces of work. So as Sam has already mentioned, the work falls into 2 categories, the live work and the dead work. I found that the dead work tends to be cases which have been chosen by supervisors to use for all pupils because they demonstrate certain learning points or are very representative of a certain kind of work, which is good for you to see. So for example, in our civil liability seat, all pupils get given a occupier's liability case to do because it's kind of a straightforward case that is representative of the kind of work that you do in the seat, and it's sort of a helpful way to start to get into the kind of work. And then, of course, you have the live work, where you also have the opportunity to kind of really help your supervisor on a case which they're actually doing, sort of see, you know, the impact will be, you know, inevitably a small part of the case, but you can actually see yourself helping and contributing, and that's really helpful. So at the end, for each piece of that work, you'll receive written feedback, and that will contain what you've done well and what you can improve on. And that is continuous throughout your seat. And in addition to that feedback, for each piece of work, you receive feedback at the halfway point and the full way point of each seat. So it's around 4 weeks, 5 weeks for the halfway point, depending on the seat length, and at the end. So, and in this document, it's sort of set out like a school report, it's the closest way I can say it, where you have each of the criteria, so the intellectual ability, expressive ability, you have a little box, and the supervisors will write in there how they think that you're doing in total over the seat. And this is really useful because you can kind of have an impression from each piece of work, okay, where does my supervisor think I'm at? But this actually tells you, and I've kind of found that sometimes I'm sort of being too harsh on myself about how I'm doing, and actually you get told, oh, you know, we think you're doing at a certain level. And at the halfway point, it's just qualitative, and so it's a text box and narrative. But in the full time for your seat, you're given a sort of grading for a very competent, outstanding, competent, so the same ones as the bar course. And that is, again, very helpful because it gives you a slightly more quantitative feeling of how you're doing, because otherwise it can be quite difficult to know what level you actually are. And I can understand that process of continuous assessment may sound quite daunting, and, you know, inevitably pupillage is a bit tough at times, it is tiring, but I'd much rather know where I stand and know what I want to improve on, rather than sending a piece of work in and saying, oh, you haven't done well there, or you've done well there, but not actually know where I need to improve and where I'm at, what level I'm actually hitting now. So I think it's much better to have that negative feedback up front and be able to respond to it. So in addition to that continuous assessment, which is sort of makes up the bulk of the work which you do, there are 2 other formal assessments. So the first is a piece of work for what's called the shadow panel. It's not a sort of shadowy organisation. Instead, they're just anonymous members of Chambers who set you a piece of work, and every single pupil gets exactly the same piece of work, exactly the same time limits, and you will do it, and it's marked blind. So the person marking it doesn't know who has completed the piece of work, and then that is then taken into account. It's graded and then taken into account as part of the tenancy decision. The second formal assessment is an advocacy training programme, which has a formal assessment at the end, but your progress is also taken into account throughout the training programme. So all of this information, all of the feedback, both written for individual pieces of work and also the half-time, full-time feedback, form assessments, all of that is brought together for the tenancy decision. I think that's reassuring because it means that it isn't all boiling down to one formal assessment, one exam in the end of June or July. You instead have a feeling that you have opportunities throughout the year, and throughout your seats, you may do better in some seats, may do worse in others, but ultimately it's going to be a holistic assessment about how you've done across the year. So it's all collated in late June or July, and that's when the tenancy decision is made, again, using the criteria that I outlined at the beginning. Pupils are not in competition with one another, I think, as Vikram indicated at the beginning. And we certainly feel that way throughout the process. We don't feel that we're in competition with one another. We can focus solely on supporting one another throughout the process. So that's everything on the feedback and assessment. I'm now going to hand over to Santosh to discuss the in-house training.
Thanks, Monty. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Santosh Carvalho. I'm one of the pupils here, and I'm going to talk very briefly about the training program in-house at 39. A bit about my background. I'm from a working class background. I originally did a degree in computer science many moons ago. I then started a career as a management consultant, and much like many career changes at Chambers, and as Emily said, I got very bored very quickly with what I was doing, and I wanted a different type of challenge. I was also lucky enough to volunteer in a legal capacity at a refugee camp, which kicked off an interest in the law. I, like Monty, did my law degree part-time and also undertook a master's in law, and then I was lucky enough to get pupillage here. I think as a career changer, as an overall message unrelated to training, I think all three of us come from backgrounds where we've changed careers, and there are a number of people at Chambers who have done so. So for any of those of you listening who come from a slightly atypical background, I think it's reflective of a trend in the bar in general that's becoming more the case that people come with an hinterland of some type. In regards to training, I think the overall message that I want to leave you with is that there's a significant investment that Chambers places into training over and above the inherent learning that you get from the assessed work and the shadowing. And the training is very focused on not just your first 6 months of practice, but what early years of practice will look like. And they're aiming to ground you in habits and behaviors that will hopefully last the entirety of your career at the bar. There's 3 bits of training that I'd like to emphasize. The first is the advocacy training. It is assessed, as Monty pointed out, but the training I found went far above and beyond anything that I'd encountered at bar school or law school for that matter. So for instance, yes, we look at cross-examination and examination as chief. For those of you who've done the bar course or doing the bar course, you'll encounter those. But the level of detail, not just in the delivery or the style, but the thought process in why we picked a particular question, what were the orders of questions that we were looking for, if it's examination in chief or cross-examination. That was the level of detail we went into. We also had specific sessions, and we continue to have specific sessions on case theory. So how do you unpack a particular set of papers? What's the golden nugget you're looking for? And then how are you structuring in your entire case around that? Learning from people who've been very successful in practice is very helpful and will continue to be so. I think there's also a significant amount of training in preparation for the first 6 months. So we've been given specific training on small claims, different types of small claims, as Sam indicated, that we might be expected to see in our second six, sorry. And to that end, there are at least 3 mock trials that you go through as part of the advocacy program, the final one of which is assessed for the purposes of pupillage. But really, the aim is not the assessment. The aim is to get us ready to be on our feet, to be very good barristers in the first early part of our careers. These are demands on our time. So we do, or rather, Chambers expects pupils to prepare for this, but like with everything else, our time is very structured. So we are given time off to prepare specifically for these advocacy exercises and the assessment. So again, there's no expectation that we're burning the midnight oil over and above anything that we've been set as assessed work. The second type of training is what I think I can describe as practice orientated. So everything from ethics to managing your practice through to a specific type of case that we're going to encounter in our second six are types of training we've encountered. So as I said, with advocacy, ethics training went far and above anything I personally had been exposed to during my bar course. So it was aimed at the types of scenarios we'd be expected to see in our first 6 months of being in our feet, but also they were drawn on the collective real life experience of several members of Chambers. So these are things that had happened to them. And it was really for us to work through how we would have responded, and also then very helpfully the types of resources we have available at Chambers to help, whether it's an informal WhatsApp group or calling your supervisor, and of course more formal materials available through the BSB and the Bar Council. The second type of training that I found immensely helpful in-house was on costs. So whilst advocacy is really emphasized, and of course structuring your submissions, costs we looked at, I think only a couple of days ago, we were given that training, and it went again in a level of detail beyond what I would have expected in a training provider. We looked at specific types of submissions you can make, how to weave in costs into your case strategy, how to think about costs not just as a finishing touch in your submissions, but at the outset of even constructing your arguments. And then the third type of training I'd like to talk about is slightly more informal, but nevertheless very important. And I describe it as training, even though it's mentoring. And it's been really useful for training because all of us have been assigned 2 mentors. And the purpose of this is to have an informal sounding board outside of the pupillage process. So someone who's completely divorced from assessing us, from looking at whether we're capable, whether we're good enough, but they're just there for us to ask any questions, but also for us to reflect on the feedback we've been getting and think about ways in which they, because these mentors are drawn from the junior end of Chambers, look at the ways in which they dealt with similar feedback and how they approached learning in that capacity. And informally as well, a number of junior members of Chambers have come to us, taken us out for coffees to check in on us, make sure we're okay, all with the aim of making sure that we're grounded, confident and ready for our second 6. That's all I wanted to say by way of training. I'll now hand over to Daniel.
Hi everyone, Daniel. I did a law degree at Queen Mary University before doing a bachelor's in human rights. I want to tell you a bit more about the way Chambers takes care of you during the pupillage year. Pupillage cares about you. I think that's a fundamental point. Chambers is aware that pupillage can be difficult, and there are different aspects in which Chambers supports you through it. One example is the working hours. You are only expected to work between 9 AM and 6 PM, and people in Chambers will make sure you are going home at 6 AM. And if you are in Chambers after 6 AM, you can expect somebody to be knocking on your door, wanting to know why you're not on your way. That's important because you need to know how to manage your time in Chambers and in your practice. When you have your own practice, you will be responsible for managing what work you do and when, and it all plays into that as well as your overall well-being. So close making that you get bullies, and that's also part of your general support. We also have people in Chambers who are mental health first-aiders. You can talk to if you are having any difficulties. And we also have papers from the Pupillage Committee who is responsible for pastoral care beyond the formal part of because my experience is everyone will help you in any way they can, regardless of their role in Chambers. And I think that should make you feel welcome and well supported.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you to all four of you. That's incredibly helpful. It's been lovely to hear from you all. And in fact, Sam, Monty and Santos, you're the first three that haven't been mine, so to speak. Daniel, I had the pleasure of having you as I think probably my very last pupil. But it's fantastic to hear from, as I say, as I sort of describe the actual coalface. We've had one question which has popped up about the amount of dead work, which is a ghastly title, but anyway, not current work and live work, whether it's a 50-50 split. The reality is it really, really depends on what the pupil supervisor is doing. What we try to do is make sure that within each of the 4 seats, you've seen the range of sort of work and expertise that you might need, whether it's the types of pleadings or the areas of law and so on and so forth. And we tend to have a bit of a stash of work that we can refer to amongst the supervisors if there is not the range that we might need. And as you heard, we have a few cases that are just there to kind of get people up and running or to cover specific areas. But generally, most of it is live and current work that you work through with your pupil supervisors as you go. I'm sure that may well be further questions for our live pupils, if I can call you that. I mean, we have all been a pupillage, and something that is really important to remember is everyone at the bar has been a pupil, so we do all know what it feels like. But those that are perhaps a little closer to that current feeling will doubtless be around to answer any further questions. But given that we're running slightly over time, so probably the only thing we need to teach our pupils is how to make submissions to time a bit better, is I'm going to hand over now to Chiara and Dan, who are going to tell you a little bit about life as junior members as we work our way through the chronology. So thanks very much, and over to you.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks everybody who's gone ahead. We're going to try and speed up a bit to gain some lost time, but I'm Chiara. I was a pupil in 2021 to 22, so I've been a tenant now for just over a year. And so I thought that I would talk about the kind of stage when you're transitioning from being a pupil to being a new tenant and what that's like. And then Dan, who is a little more senior than me, will talk about the progression as you get more senior. So, I mean, it can be quite daunting when you suddenly go from, as you've just heard, a very structured pupillage and you're getting your pupillage award, so effectively you've got salary, someone's reviewing your work, to basically being on your own and being self-employed. And there are sort of 2 big challenges that come with this, and I've kind of split them into work challenges and practice challenges. But what I will say from the outset is that 39 really try to make lots of support available for both those kinds of challenges. Your supervisors are generally still very happy to help when they're free. We've got a very friendly open door type chambers. You can ask other members both kind of law questions and also practice questions. And we've also got things like WhatsApp groups. So we've got a pupil queries group for when you're on your feet that some of the junior members, myself included, still use. And a sort of court protection, for example, group mentoring, all on WhatsApp, so you can shoot those tricky questions off. So there is support available for all those challenges. So first, what are the kind of work challenges you face? Basically, you're brand new, you don't yet normally have any expertise, and nobody knows who you are. So to help with that, Chambers have a great marketing team, so they will get you out there at networking events and giving talks from day one, and you get the chance to shape that. So what are the practice areas you're interested in? Great, go to those events, go to those bar associations, and Chambers will help with that, and senior members will be going to those and you can tag along, and eventually you'll start getting recognised, and you can start building your kind of recognition in the areas that you want to work in. The other thing that's great is the breadth of work that Chambers does and the expertise means there's lots of silks and lots of senior juniors who can lead you on really cool cases. So that's another way to get good work that you're interested in before you've got any recognition of your own. And lastly, I just wanted to mention secondments. So I'll talk about this a bit later, but Chambers is quite keen to get its junior members off on secondments in areas they're interested in. And that's a great way of meeting. You might be seconded in a solicitor's firm or with a particular organisation, and you'll meet the lawyers there and the people there that you'll be working with, and they often will instruct you then for once you finish that secondment going forward in your practice. Another challenge is obviously, you know, law is difficult. You come up with ethical problems all the time, and the actual subject matter of your cases can be tricky because it's all new to you. So, well, hopefully not completely new because you've gone through pupillage, but it's often stuff you haven't come across and fairly new. But as Emily has said, you know, everybody remembers what it was like to be a pupil and to be a junior tenant, and they want to help you. I ask for help all the time. Everybody does. And you will, throughout pupillage, have built up a network of people during pupillage that you can lean on. So as Santosh said, you've got your mentor that you'll have a relationship with, the juniors you'll have gotten to know, and you'll have your supervisors as well, who are generally still happy to help. So you'll have support in chambers for those tricky, like, oh, I don't understand what this means, or where do I look for this questions. And then lastly, getting the kind of work you want. I've touched on this a bit in terms of the marketing things you could do in getting led, but also you can go and ask members of chambers who have interesting mixes in their practice that you might want to emulate and say, hey, you're doing this cool stuff, how did you get there? And also talking to the clerks, telling them what you want to do, and working with them to shape the practice you want, which leads me nicely on to kind of the other challenge, which is what I've deemed the kind of practice challenges, which is you go from being a pupil to basically being your own business. And that comes with kind of, you know, very physical setting yourself up, you know, getting yourself a desk and a computer, and how do you want to have your work phone and all of that, for which Chambers has a great in-house IT team. They actually gave us, me and my co-pupil Chris Moss, a little guide of kind of, here's the different kinds of tech that people use in Chambers, and this is what we recommend. And they're really useful just for that really obvious physically getting set up bit. And then figuring out the work-life balance that you want to have. You're self-employed now, you can sort of, you could work all the time if you wanted to, and you'll make loads of money that way, or you could say, no, this is the kind of work-life balance I want, or I've got these other commitments because I'm a carer or whatever it is. And the good thing about the 9 to 6 rule that Daniel was talking about is that does get you into good habits to make sure that you're not up working all night when you first start. But you get to start in that early period, figuring out how you want your practice to look, and both in terms of the kinds of work you want to take on and how much you want to take on, and that includes practical things like how much money you want to earn and things like that. Figuring out how to manage your diary, dealing with clerks and solicitors and clients and all of that, and you will get help with that from other juniors, because again, go ask for advice. People are so friendly; they're always willing to help. Finding people whose practice you want to emulate and ask them questions. I think I actually shadowed Dan Kazalko, who's going to speak in a minute, quite early on, because I said, oh, I'm quite interested in regulatory work. And he said, oh yeah, I'm doing this dentistry panel thing, if you want to come. Yeah, he's nodding. So he gave me the papers and I came and joined in on that. So you absolutely can. And those are those challenges, but I think we are really well supported here, and it's been much easier than it might have been if it was more lonely. So it's different to being a pupil, but it's not a cliff edge, and there's still lots of support. And before I leave you, I'll sort of give a summary of the types of work I did last year. My main interests are public and regulatory law, but roughly over the last year, I did about quite a lot of sort of civil litigation, civil liability trials and applications as well. So that's small claims, fast tracks, strikeouts, applications to adjourn, costs, hearings, all of that. I did a secondment at the Financial Ombudsman Service. That was 1 day a week for about 6 months. And I've actually had follow-on work from that already. I've been instructed from them. I do a fair amount of court of protection work and sort of associated things, so serious medical treatment cases. And that was great because that got me into the High Court kind of as sole counsel very early on. I think I was actually technically still a pupil. I was in like the last couple of weeks of being a pupil, and I was already in the High Court, and that's landed me a reported case this summer. So paying for my robes and wig actually paid off. But I've also done more long-running kind of paperwork cases. So I worked for a local authority, but basically they were looking to revamp their constitution. I did a long-running sort of 8-week-long piece of consultation on the various aspects of that. So not court work, but still really interesting. And then I've been involved in a case in the International Court of Justice, which will pop back up later this year, but that's being led by someone in Chambers. and then plenty other sort of random bits and bobs. So that's a flavour of the kinds of bits and pieces of work I've been doing over the last year, and what it's been like as a brand new tenant. I'll hand over to Dan.
Thanks, Kiara. I'm Dan. I'm a couple of years down the line from Kiara. I began tenancy in 2019, although actually I didn't start properly working in Chambers until August 2020, because I went and did a year as a judicial assistant at the Supreme Court, which was great fun. And then I came back to Chambers and was really well supported in coming back in exactly the same way that Kiara's just described. And I agree with everything that's been set out. One other thing I would say from my early practice, and I know is quite common for lots of members, is public inquiry work is quite big at the very junior end. So I was heavily involved in the infected blood inquiry. It was sort of the bedrock of my practice for 3 years, which was great because you got to see really excellent questioning and advocacy. It's Jenny Richards KC, who's a senior silk at 39, who is lead counsel to the inquiry. A really newsworthy and interesting case, and it gave me something that I could work on regularly, which is great from a funding perspective. I mean, there's many considerations to take into account in what work you end up doing, but having that bedrock is great, and it gave me a lot of flexibility to sort of try lots of different other things. And yeah, so that certainly is still the case now. There's people on COVID, there's people on the post office inquiry. Grenfell has been a big part of Chambers. So yeah, so that's another aspect of quite junior practice, which I think has been particularly big in recent years. So I'm now a few years in, which has gone by in a flash, and I still feel like I am the most junior member of Chambers, and that certainly isn't the case anymore. And it's been great to do that. I've had a fantastic time, and I love doing the job that I do. The big change that's happened recently, or in the last year or two for me, is that I've begun to specialise in a way that you start off being quite generalist and experiencing all areas of Chambers. And so while I do still cover work arising from all of our 4 main practice areas, I'm actually a bit more narrowly aimed at 1 or 2 of them. And that sort of happened, the way that manifested itself was a few things happened. First, and most obviously, after a few years, you will have one of the clerking groups might take over your clerking. So in my case, I started doing a lot of planning and property. And so it was the PEP clerks who took over sort of running my practice at the at sort of the high level. Certainly all the clerks still involved in my work, and I do some public, I do some civil, I do some construction, and those clerks also help with that sort of who is running me day to day. And my experience is, Kiara, and I think everyone else, very active practice management. When you want something to happen in your practice, you can essentially ask for a meeting with the clerks, or you have meetings every sort of, I think, half a year to a year generally, but you can ask for it more frequently, and you can set out, this is where I am now, this is where I want to go, get advice from all the clerks, and sort of see, working with them, how you can really develop your practice. And an important part of being generalist at the start was I saw so much stuff I wouldn't have otherwise thought I would be interested in and want to do. When I joined 39 and when I applied for Pupillage, I was really, really interested in public law. That's where I saw my future. And actually, my practice is a lot broader than that. I do some public law, but I also do planning, which I never even really heard of prior to being a pupil. And so that sort of specialism over time has come from having the experience of all the different things we go out and do as very junior members and indeed pupils. And then for me, the specialism now and sort of narrowing down what I do has also brought actually starting to have good expertise in a subject area, which is quite comforting in the sense that cases come in now and you don't immediately need to be like, well, I need to go and read all this because I don't know quite what this is, which is an important part of being a barrister. But there are things now that I see which is part of my regular practice that I can deal with well, deal with effectively. I'm quicker, I'm more experienced, and that's been quite a nice development that I've seen in myself. And Chambers is really great as a place to do that in, because I can still now go and ask questions of anyone in Chambers if I still need that support. So it's not like, you're a first couple of years as a tenant and then slowly become a sole operator. Certainly not the case at all. And in fact, I probably ask for help more now than I did right at the start, which maybe says something about me. I don't know. But yeah, so, you know, the specialism has brought that through, but still feel well supported. And the other thing that has really changed for me, and it sort of builds on one of the things Chiara said, is that I've started now getting work directed to me by name, which again is quite a nice experience because it means your marketing has worked, which you're involved in from the start, or you've done good jobs in the past, and people start coming to you and saying, well, who I actually want is Dan. And so that's been a really nice experience. I feel like the marketing that I've done with the marketing department and with the clerks has worked really well on that front, and it's allowed me to develop in a way that I wanted to, as opposed to sort of just falling into something. So yeah, that's sort of how my practice has developed recently. Just to give you an idea of what life is like in Chambers, there's a very social scene for the juniors. We have our own chat, we go out and do things. We had our Christmas lunch just before Christmas last year, which was great fun, and there was a really good social atmosphere, which I think is great as well, and really supports the development of you as a person and you as a barrister in Chambers. So yeah, so just as a final thing from me, just give you a sort of summary of where I am as well. About 50% of my work currently is led, which is a nice experience of being at Chambers. We have lots of SILPs and lots of senior juniors. And so I've been doing the infected blood inquiry, which was led, a long-running planning inquiry into a solar farm in Cambridge, which is led, and a couple of High Court cases coming up, again, all led. But also I get the opportunity to do a lot of unled things, so various medical practitioner tribunals, which Chiara referenced, which yeah, was an interesting dental case, is one that yeah, I was doing when she came and attended, planning inquiries and smaller stuff, and lots about village greens, which are much more interesting than they sound. So yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed the day so far and you're continuing to enjoy it. Thanks all.
Thank you both so much. It's really great to hear you bouncing through the early years and indeed the sort of living proof of helping out other members and other junior tenants, which is really great. So thanks, Chiara and Dan. Now we're going to romp over to Joe and Gemma, who are just zooming in and out there at the top. And they are going to tell us about how second, sixth and early years are managed from a clerking point of view. So thanks very much. Over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the practice managers in the civil liability team, and I started my career here in 2014 and rejoined last year, and it's great to be back and part of such great Chambers. Gemma Aldine is co-presenting and is also one of the practice managers in this team and one of the assistants. As you can see from the agenda, we will cover what you can expect during your second six and the early years after you've, of course, completed a successful pupillage. Gemma is going to cover the first part for you, so I'll hand over to her now.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Gemma, and I'm one of the assistant practice managers. I've been clerking at 39 Essex Chambers for around 2 years now. I currently look after the civil liability team alongside Joe and 4 other clerks within Chambers. In terms of pupillage, I think something that Chambers does really well, and I would say is reasonably rare in much more of the larger sets within London, is that we get all of our pupils in their second six to practice. This means that you get to go to court usually once or twice a week, which equates to around 20 to 30 cases in the 6 months. Second six pupils will be undertaking and seeing cases in their own right. I think this has a real advantage, and it puts you in a great position once you are taken on as tenant. You get to go to different courts, mainly county courts, and we do try and tend to keep these within the boundaries of the M25 and as local as possible, but I can't make too many promises on that. By doing this, this allows second six pupils to interact with judges, ushers, opponents and clients. It's really important to build good relationships with the court staff and ushers. This can sometimes be the difference between a really good court experience and not such a great one. This also allows pupils to start building relationships with clients, and this will be very beneficial for their future career. Some of these will also be held remotely. Obviously, since COVID, this is more common, and this is a great way to navigate online remote video hearings by the mediums of MS Teams and Zoom. So the hearings will be small and simple, such as small claims, trips and slips, road traffic accidents, MOJ stage 3 hearings, and COP section 21A matters. Second 6 pupils also get exposure to small contract disputes, which often come from the commercial and construction team, as well as planning enforcement cases from the planning and environmental team. These hearings will also be fairly distributed amongst all of the pupils. The clerks liaise closely with their pupil supervisors to ensure that all of the pupils have sufficient time to balance caseload and preparation and mitigate any issues that arise. Another great benefit to this scheme is that alongside your pupillage award, you also get to keep all of the fees earned on these cases. I understand this might sound like a daunting prospect, but beforehand, we ensure that all of the pupils receive a thorough training scheme, whereby other junior members of Chambers will provide mock trials, different training programs, and the mock trials be in relation to the type of hearings you'll be undertaking. This provides hints and tips and just different things that you might need to make sure that you're confident and able to go to court on your own. The second 6 isn't just all about hard work though. We do try and organise as many social events between the pupils and clerks as possible. This helps us to get to know you in a more informal way. There are many different social events throughout Chambers throughout the whole year, and this is something that will be set up to help build up these relationships. In my opinion, and I'm sure Joe would agree, the key to an effective pupillage is definitely to ensure really good communication with your practice team and supervisors. We really are here to help and support you to succeed. The Clerks Room is a very open and friendly space, and we are always there to assist with any issues or just have a general catch up. So yeah, I'm going to now pass over to Joe, who's going to speak on early years after tenancy.
Thank you. So now you need to imagine that you've been taken on as a tenant in Chambers. After that, the mentoring and support that's already been spoken about will continue to be there for you when you get taken on as a tenant. You have the same buddy in Chambers from Pupillage, who as a junior tenant would have recently been through the same early year stages as you are about to sort of go on. So a lot of guidance and reassurance will be there for you. You will continue to be instructed in the matters that Gemma just spoke about during your second 6th, but you will obviously now be a tenant, so you have a much wider range of opportunities to become involved in the breadth of practice areas that we cover here at 39. For example, as Chiara obviously mentioned already, the junior tenants will often be called upon to consider taking on a mini secondment. The length of these secondments can vary, but they are usually 1 to 2 days a week, and we offer this to a variety of clients and sectors. As an example, one of our junior tenants at the moment is on a secondment for 2 days a week at a law firm in their cost team. And these types of opportunities are excellent for the junior bar to get to know clients, how they work, how their sector works, and obviously gather knowledge on that particular area of law. And that will help obviously start the informed relations with clients that you can build on as you progress, and then transfer that into work, which Chiara obviously has done, as she said. Another highlight of coming to 39 in those early years is the chance to work with some of our preeminent silks and senior juniors at the bar, getting to be exposed to high level, high profile, interesting and important cases that we have in Chambers. At the moment, we have a lot of public inquiry work in Chambers, and we are very proud to have lead counsel on both the COVID inquiry and the post office inquiry, as well as others. But we have a large teams in Chambers working on both of these, from the junior end up into leading silks. We have 25 members on the Government Legal Department Attorney General's panel. You can't apply to the C panel until you're at least 3 years cool, but in the early years you can join the junior scheme. So the members of Chambers who are already on their cases can bring you in to help you, on their cases and build relationships with them, which is another great opportunity for some good cases. So as clerks, we will sit you down as well, ideally every 6 months, in a practice meeting, which is where we will go through, your areas you wish to develop, general aspirations, and anything we can help with, or any concerns you may have. As obviously Gemma already mentioned, communication is absolutely key between all of us to take you forward in your career at the bar. There are also a lot of social opportunities at the bar and in Chambers for business development side of things. 39, we've got a huge seminar program across our core practice groups where we'll host these in our conference facilities upstairs on our 5th floor. Juniors are actively encouraged to attend these talks, and then we follow them with drinks, which is really important and a great chance to mingle with clients and obviously get to know other members of Chambers and the clerks as well.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, was that it? Sorry.
I've got a little bit more to go. Yeah.
I'm jumping in. I beg your pardon. Carry on.
Taking a breather. As with such a large set of Chambers, it's really important for Chambers culture to make sure there's lots of opportunities to socialise together. In term time, we have Chambers lunch once a month, where members of Chambers kindly host and pay for lunch. And we all eat upstairs together in one of our conference suites. And there's also drinks every Friday from 5 p.m. I don't think there's much more for us to say, apart from we really do assure you that we appreciate how daunting pupillage can be, but it's a really excellent supporting facility here at 39. So we hope this is helpful, and I'll pass you back to Emily.
Thanks, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
As Joe ends up saying, we do have drinks and lunch, and even for oldies like me, because quite a lot of junior socialising happens way past my bedtime. But it's great to be able to all get together. But one thing that it just does make me reflect on, actually, before I hand over to Alex, I can see waiting in the wings, is that being at 39 is very much a group endeavour for all of us. And so obviously you're thinking about it applying as pupils, but we're not really hierarchical from sort of junior tenant to heads of chambers, nor do we make much distinction between people who work here in whatever capacity. So all of our staff and members of 39 are just as cherished and important to us as the barristers are, and we all, I like to think we all pull in the same direction. We certainly all share the same room and space and close engagements, as Joe says. And indeed our marketing team, who are always busy working quite often in the background, but are effectively, for example, making today happen. So it really is a great team endeavour from top to bottom and from left to right, if I could put it like that. Without which, therefore, with no further ado, I will hand over to our talk about more broadly Essex Chambers as a place to work, starting with Alex. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Emily. It's good to join you all. Just want to mention briefly a few things about Chambers, what you could expect from the building and the IT area. Then I'll pass over to Anthony, who will cover more parts about the pupillage from further from a clerk's perspective. So I've been in Chambers for many years now, and we've managed to be given the ability by Chambers to build a bespoke IT and tailored environment for a barrister Chambers, and we've been very lucky enough to been heading that up for many years, and it's been a pleasure to work with all the barristers to do that. We have a very well thought out Chambers from an IT perspective to ensure that barristers and pupils alike can function correctly without having to consider too much about the IT challenges which face people. We have full on-site IT and ops team to look after everything from the most basic mundane things from the building to the high-end IT, which we all look after in-house. It's not it's all the whole team's on site the whole time. The pupils, when they join Chambers, have exactly the same IT kit as all the barristers have. So you have a laptop, an iPhone, 2 screens, sit-stand desk, the whole thing that the barristers will have, and sometimes even better equipment than some of the barristers have. You also have access to the legal on-site libraries, LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, again, identical to the barristers. You have full access to those libraries, and we welcome feedback and any recommendations for further online libraries that you would require. For many years now, we've been heavily encouraging paperless working. We have a Citrix file system for paperless working and document sharing, which has been very successful, and we believe everyone finds the ease of using such system negates the use for excessive paper use. As mentioned already, we have sit-stand desks for pupils. When I joined Chambers, the seating arrangements, as some of the barristers may recall, weren't quite so nice, but now we have fantastic desk facilities that we introduced a few years ago, and it really makes working life far more comfortable. Also, pupils have access to the CRM diary fees data system from day one. So you're always encouraged to engage with the clerks with the way the diary work and the billing, etc. So you don't have all these things thrust onto you from day one. So should you achieve tenancy, these things are easy to use from day one. There's no surprises, and it makes life easier all round. From a building perspective, in 2015, we moved to our amazing new building on 81 Chancery Lane from our previous home in 39 Essex Street, where we had 3 buildings, all considerable size, but it made life quite tricky working over different buildings. This relocation allowed us to bring all the current tenants and staff under one roof, and we're extremely lucky in regards to the facilities that we have in Chambers. It's a very modern building which allows visitors making use of step-free access, automatic doors, and all the features of a modern building, which we missed out sometimes on the older buildings, as nice as they were. We boast having amazing shower facilities, secure on-site cycle facilities. We have fresh towels and all the things you need if you wish to run or cycle into work, which makes life much easier. I myself cycle into work, and it makes my life a lot easier. We have lockers that you can use to store your belongings and small things like that, just to make the whole daily routine of coming into Chambers much easier. So we try to think of all aspects there. We have 11 fully equipped meeting rooms with high-speed internet. They're all furnished with television screens and computers and high-definition webcams that make virtual hearings very easy. In fact, we've been using ever since the start of the pandemic, which seems quite a long time ago now. Many people come into Chambers just to use the fantastic equipment we've got upstairs, and we have as I've said before, we have an on-site team. So if there are any challenges with these virtual hearings or just even a basic Zoom call, there's always somebody on site that can help about that. On the flip side, getting away from the professional side, we have an on-site games room. So we have pool, darts table tennis, and just a comfortable seating area downstairs, just to go and hide away should you feel the need to do so. The building itself is about 54,000 square feet. It's quite a large building, quite a large responsibility, and we're also aware of the environmental impact of the building that we have. So we have on the roof, we have a green roof, a garden kind of thing, and we have 82 solar panels which feed directly into reducing our electricity consumption. Alongside this, no one else actually knows this yet because they arrive in 2 weeks. We're getting some more energy efficient coffee machines. The bar does tend to function quite well on caffeine, so these new machines will be enjoyed by all, and we're looking forward to introducing them. We also look where we can with all the cleaning products and anything else to have green certified cleaning products, but we're always looking for different areas to particularly improve that sort of challenge that every organisation has. We recycle everything that we can, from batteries to paper, and even we've just recently started recycling vapes, which has been really successful, and I didn't quite realise how many people vape and quite how popular it would be to recycle them. So that's been a new part that we've introduced. As I've said already, we've got an amazing and varied ops and IT team. We're always here to help and listen to any questions from the moment pupillage starts right through to tenancy and beyond. We're always here to listen to any recommendations that you may have for us or suggestions. And we've always been very lucky to be able to work in such a nice Chambers with such nice people. So not much else I can really say about the building and IT. I think if it's okay with Emily, we'll hand over to Anthony now to.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you so very much. And sitting with you on the Green Strategy Committee, I can attest to Alex's considerable commitment on that front. We're hoping to have some bees as well soon.
We are. Sorry, I forgot about the bees.
Yeah, don't forget the bees. I'm really keen on the bees. So we may yet have Chambers honey. But anyway, yes. That's all a sidebar. Over to Anthony now to carry on talking to us. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Emily. Much of what I'm going to speak about now has already been covered by the previous talks, and I'm mindful of time, so I'll try to rattle through. A warm welcome to all. My name is Anthony King. I'm a practice manager within the public law team, and I'll be speaking to you briefly today about wellbeing and work-life balance here at 39 At 39, we are committed to ensuring Chambers is a healthy and safe environment for all to work in. We are a large set of chambers with a lot of members, and we do appreciate it can be a daunting prospect entering pupillage. As such, we want to help to make this time as fluid as possible for all of our pupils, bearing in mind the pressures and challenges you will no doubt face during pupillage. When you commence, you'll be assigned a buddy. Your buddy will keep in regular contact with you, so if you need any support or have any questions during this time, they are on hand to assist, and the classroom is also a safe place to seek guidance from as well. We have a variety of policies in place to help support you. These range from our equality, diversity and inclusion policy to wellbeing, harassment and reasonable adjustment policies. All of these are referred to in the pupillage handbook you will receive and will be explained to you in detail by our COO upon starting pupillage. We value our culture here in Chambers, and we try as much as possible to support you during pupillage as our current pupils have explained, so that you perform to the best of your ability. We endeavour to adopt a strict 9 AM to 6 PM working day, so that you're not too overwhelmed with work, and our pupillage supervisors do try to enforce this as best they can. There will be, of course, times when this does not happen, as is the nature of the bar, but if this occurs on a regular basis and becomes a problem, then we'll seek to address this, especially during pupillage, so that you maintain a healthy work-life balance. All of our practice managers within the classroom are trained on mental health awareness, so they have a base understanding of how to help you if you need assistance. We also have a trained mental health first aid in the classroom as well. To further promote a healthy work-life balance, we do also endorse an ethos of having fun and mixing together, and we do encourage all within Chambers to make the most of our games in our recreational area. There's usually a social evening for pupils, juniors, tenants and staff early on in pupillage as well, which gives everyone an opportunity to mingle. There's also plenty of drinks and formal lunches throughout the year as well. We also have Chambers lunch, as has been mentioned, usually every fortnight or so during term time, which the whole of Chambers is invited to attend. This is a good opportunity to chat and converse with those you may not see on a regular basis while enjoying delicious food. That's it from me, very short and sweet. If there's any questions, feel free to ask and we'll try and answer those in the Q&A session. That's it for me, and over to Emily and Emily.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. Oh, it's us now. Okay, so thank you ever so much. That's really helpful. Always good to end on food. And as Anthony says, we've got hopefully time for questions at the end. Also, people are asking questions as we go along that I've been trying to answer. So now it's me, Emily, and Emily Wilson are going to talk a little bit about actually what it's like. You've heard about the pupils being supervised. We're going to talk a little bit about being a supervisor and what we look for from our pupils. So Emily, over to you.
Okay, great. So hopefully I'm audible. I'm in one of our wonderful conference rooms. I've got a great view from the 5th floor, which unfortunately you can't see. But the great thing about these conference rooms is you just turn up and it's plug and play and very easy. So I'm Emily Wilson. I was called in 2011. I practice predominantly in public law and commercial law. My work involves a lot of judicial review, public inquiries, claims against public bodies. I work for a whole range of clients, central and local government, individuals, companies, banks, regulators, public bodies of all stripes and private. My path to becoming a barrister is pretty straightforward. So after A-levels at a comprehensive state school in North Yorkshire, I went to Cambridge where I did a law degree. I diverged slightly and did my LLM in the United States, and then came to London for the bar course and went into pupillage elsewhere. I moved to 39 in March 2022. Time has really flown by since then. I can tell you from a sort of comparative perspective, having seen a little bit more of the bar, the work here is really first class. The people are wonderful. It's a very well run, professional, supportive and fun environment. And I've also been able to spend some time at the office in Singapore, mostly for the great food, it has to be said, but that's been a great boon. So supervising, supervisors, who are we? We're a varied group of people with varied practices. We're usually around 10 or more years of call. we tend here to supervise in pairs or teams. So this year, the public law team, which I'm supervising in, has 4 of us. So you're split between time with 4 different people. You see 4 different practices. One of the reasons for doing that is that, as opposed to when I did my pupillage in 2011, 12, a lot more people are working remotely. Back then, almost everybody worked in the office almost every day. Now a lot more people work remotely, but in order to ensure that you have a good experience for pupillage and you have a lot of time with people in chambers, you can see what they're doing, and you also can absorb all the little things from calls that you hear and questions you might want to ask. We make sure that you usually have more than one supervisor, so there's always people around. Why do we supervise, you might ask? It's a completely uncompensated voluntary role. Well, I think we all got a lot from our pupillages. It's a really, really formative experience. I had a brilliant pupillage. My pupil supervisors, I think, had a huge influence on how I work, especially in my early years. We want to give back something to Chambers and to the bar. It's really enjoyable getting to know the current pupils. And I have noticed that supervisors and former supervisors end up with a really great pool of juniors to work with. So it's not entirely altruistic. And the title of our slot is really, what do we expect from you when you're pupils? Well, I think the first thing that's important to say is that we are not putting pupils in competition with one another at 39. Our aim is to keep those we take as pupils. If they reach the standard, we take them all, and mostly we do. So we have very high conversion rates from pupillage to tenancy, and those who aren't kept on, we give a lot of help to find places elsewhere. What do we not expect from you? We don't expect that you'll know exactly what to do at all times from day one without proper explanation. We don't expect that you'll know what the detailed sort of rules or expectations are, both formal and informal, around Chambers and in pupillage. We know that you come with varying experiences and different careers beforehand, different academic experiences and different life experiences. We know you won't always be able to easily predict what it is that we're looking for from you on any given area. So we will always do our best to explain what our expectations are, and we always welcome questions. That's really one of our main roles. However, universal and pretty boring advice is to arrive on time or early after a good night's sleep. Pupillage is, I think, really enjoyable experience, but it is inherently stressful. You're learning a huge amount of new information in a really packed period of time, and you're working towards that tenancy decision. So good sleep can't be underemphasized. And other than that, dress smartly, which pretty much means wear a suit, although a lot of us don't if we're not in quarter with clients. Bring a notebook and pens, and wear comfortable shoes. The early days of pupillage, we have a really thorough orientation programme. This year, I think it was over a week, although there were some gaps in the schedule where we got to see our pupils. The old-fashioned approach is you turn up, you start in your first supervisor's room, and my first supervisor took me around to see everybody who was working in Chambers that day. So it involved a lot of running up and down staircases in heels, because it was in an old-fashioned Chambers in one of the inns, and that's how things were done. So I learned, first of all, wear comfortable shoes. And we don't do it like that here. It's much more systematic, much more organised, and it's really a team-based approach, which I think is really reflective of how Chambers works and how the different teams in Chambers work together. So at 39, you will meet your supervisors, but you will also meet juniors, people who will act as mentors, the most recent pupils who have just been taken on. You'll meet the clerks, you'll meet the IT team, you'll meet the marketing team, you'll meet loads of people, and you'll have lots of different inductions from different people, and you'll have introductions to different practice areas. It's incredibly well organised and I think very impressive. We do have a role in that when we do get to see you, aside from the orientation activities, and we'll set out what our expectations are and start to get to know you. What do we expect in terms of work? Now, you've already heard from current pupils about how work is assigned and how we work together as a supervision team to make sure that you've always got something to do and you hopefully haven't got too much to do. We are trying to give you work that's pitched at the right level, by which I personally mean something that's either really quite challenging or slightly less challenging. And the first pieces of work are really, the idea is to get a sense of where you are. So hopefully a less challenging piece of work, although to be honest, it's really an art picking the right piece and remembering what it's like when you're starting out. And as you go through a supervisor, they'll be trying to work out what your strengths and weaknesses are, talking to you about them and finding ways to work on them. And you have a role in that as a pupil. So your organisation and your communication with supervisors is really important. And I think that's a key expectation. So one example of a way to do it is to give weekly updates of what you've done in the week to date and what you have planned in the week coming up in terms of hearings or conferences you're attending with supervisors or other people in chambers, and pieces of work that you have underway, and how much space there is in the diary for us to fill with other things. And then we will work as a team to figure out what the gaps are, who has a hearing at the right time that might be interesting for you to see, and also, have you done enough work for this supervisor but not that supervisor? Have you done this type of drafting, but maybe it would be useful to you to have a go at a defence or some court of protection work or judicial review? So we'll work as a team to try and make sure that your experience is as comprehensive a view as possible of our practice areas. Not all current work is necessarily going to be something I would assign as a supervisor. To be honest, you can receive really badly organised briefs where I waste a lot of time organising papers. I don't need you to do that as a pupil. I receive briefs with 20 questions and 20 follow-up questions, which are extremely time-consuming, and sometimes honestly really challenging briefs that wouldn't give you a fair chance to be stretched, but also show what you can do. So sometimes I do use older pieces of work, and that also allows a supervisor to get a real sense of what you should expect from someone at a certain stage, because you end up setting it to multiple people. We'll always take time, though, to chat through what we're doing. So you won't only see the work that you're assigned, you'll also accompany your supervisors on calls, client conferences, to court. And I always try and explain different cases that I'm involved in that are interesting, so that maybe there's a practice point in it or an ethics point or something that we can discuss. There is always structured feedback on each piece of work. There's written feedback on each piece, but we also have feedback as a supervision team midway through your seat and at the end to address specific learning points. That's a really participatory process. So what do we expect? But in that sense, we expect participation. We expect you to take the feedback on board, but also to engage with it. It's not a process where you just receive feedback from us and that's it. It's really a discussion, whether it's talking about a draft piece of work with me or whether it's as a whole group at the end of your seat. And that's both at the midpoint of the seat and at the end. And that's really important because we're making sure that we're communicating all the time what's going well, what needs work, and how we think you could improve it. How you research skills, for example. And the most important point maybe is therefore communication with your supervisors in terms of what you're learning, where you think there are gaps, and the regulator requires all sorts of things to be ticked off. So it's a joint effort between us to make sure that we're helping you do that. But also communicate to us about your workload. And we're here to encourage us and to ask questions. We don't want someone sitting and suffering silently because they were afraid to speak up. But our expectation is really you can talk to us, and we really need to help you manage the workload because that's one important role that we play. And we're also one point of contact among many in case any problems arise of any kind during pupillage. You have multiple points of contact. I don't know them all, but they range from our CEO all the way down to last year's pupils, and you'll have a lot of different options that supervisors are aware.
Thank you very much. Emily, quite a lot of the areas of supervising we've sort of talked about already. You've touched on the really important ones about what we look for with supervisors. And during the course of the afternoon, we've heard a lot of other people talking about their bits and bobs, and we're about to hear about how to apply. So I think what I'd really like to focus on are just two additional points I don't think have been touched on yet. The first is, as Emily rightly said, the first thing is not all supervisors are called Emily. We just put that in as a, as a googly to keep you going, but there are lots of other names that you can learn amongst supervisors. But the first thing, as Emily said, is it is a really important relationship. And I always say to my pupils, pupil supervisors for life, not just for Christmas. We're always available for you to ask questions of long after we cease supervising. And until quite recently, I still had phone calls from a pupil of mine who ended up practicing in another set of chambers on the South Coast, would still ring up. And I have to say, 2 of my pupil supervisors are still here in Chambers when I did my pupillage back in '93, and they are definitely the people I'd go and ask to first, because frankly, once you've been a pupil with someone, there is no such thing as a stupid question. So it is a relationship that is a very particular thing, and I think in this day and age, when a lot of what we're talking about is large businesses and 200 members of chambers and working all over the world and doing all sorts of quite amazing things, I think one of the best parts of the whole process is that relationship that you develop in a very particular way with your supervisors. The second thing I just wanted to touch on was about the way in which, as you know, we have 4 stages of pupil supervision and the 4 stages that you move through. And as Emily told you about the assessment process that happens on each occasion, halfway and at the end of the written process. And also the other pupils were telling you about the other areas of work. But what I really wanted to just talk about was how that develops and builds over the arc of the whole year of pupillage. Because there are 2 things. Firstly, no pupil is in competition with the other pupils. And I think that is a really important point. It's been said a number of times, but should be emphasised. You are not competing with your fellow pupils. Our absolute best aim is for all of you to be taken on, because we invest an awful lot of time and money and energy into both selecting you and training you. So we want you to be our tenants. And following on from that, therefore, the second thing is that, as you might expect, each of the 4 stages, and of course you'll do different things. You do want a stage, so you may have civil liability as your first stage, or you may have public as your first stage, and then go on to civil or public or C&C later. But what we expect from you in your first seat will be less than what we expect from you in your 4th seat. So you will have a developing arc of progression through pupillage as you go. Obviously, at each stage, you'll be starting a new area of work, so you won't be expected to know everything about public law at the beginning of your public law seat. But if it is your 3rd seat, you will be expected to be better at drafting than you were in your 1st seat. So we do build on that and take account of that. But the other thing, and I think the pupils all mentioned that sometimes you have a better seat somewhere than the other, is at each stage you get a clean sheet. So we don't have any muttering between supervisors saying, oh, that was a bit ropey, or that didn't go well. On each occasion you get to start again. So if you think, and it's inevitable during the year, that you flag a bit at one stage, you get the opportunity to completely start again with no judgment from anybody else. The only caveat to that, and we don't talk, I was going to say, we don't discuss pupils adversely within chambers either. We are very supportive. We do recognise it's an important training stage, so we don't sit and pore over people's work or gossip about it behind each other's backs. And we specifically don't, within supervisors, as I say, kind of colour one suit's judgment with another. The only thing that we do, and we will do that with your full knowledge as part of the assessment process, is if there's a particular thing that you've had difficulty with or something you've found hard to do. So, for example, whether it was drafting or whether it was a particular area like legal research or something that you were finding very hard and that had cropped up in a seat, we would, on talking to you in advance, feed that into your next seat so that you can have a structured learning process and can continue to develop a necessary skill. So we support, we encourage, we hope that you succeed, and we do everything we can to make that happen. I think that's all that I was going to say at the moment. I'm now going to hand over to Colin and Edmund, who are going to talk about how, having listened to all of this, we hope you will turn it into an application to join us. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you. Do you want to introduce ourselves, Ed, as pupil supervisors who are not called Emily?
Yeah, go for it. Give yourself a little introduction, and the people have been saying a little bit about their background of why they've come here to Chambers, how they've made this path, and what makes them particularly jolly and not Emily.
Well, my name's Edmund Townsend. I'm a civil litigation group member and pupil supervisor. So I do things like personal injury, clinical negligence, property damage and product liability, that sort of thing. And the thing that makes me jolly is my daughter. I'm going to collect from nursery shortly.
Wonderful. I'm Colin Toman. I'm also pupil supervisor on the Pupillage committee. Those are the bits that I share with Ed. Our practices are rather different. I do principally public law, environmental law. I'm on the Attorney General's panel. And I suppose the interesting thing at the start of my practice is I finished my education in Germany, and I spent some time at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. We are going to be covering the how to apply, hopefully infusing a little bit of helpful panic given the stage we're at in the process, but hopefully also giving you the tools and the tips in order to complete the form. I'll be looking at first three aspects. That's the process, what we're looking for, and mini pupillage. And then Ed will give you his insights on interviews and do's and don'ts, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, off we go. Process, this is why there's a degree of urgency. The window is open. Last time I checked, you have 27 days to complete this form. It's due on the 7th of February. And the one thing you will hopefully take away from this segment is don't leave it till the last minute. Give yourself sufficient time, have a look at it now, start completing it. If at all possible, have someone else look at it. That could be you after a suitable gap, just to make sure that you've put forward your best foot. It's then that the next period of interest will be the first round interviews. We will notify those successful and not successful in time for interviews, which are due to happen 18th of March to the 28th of March. And that's likely to take the form of you coming and studying a problem, us asking you some questions about it, and us having the chance to get to know you a little further more generally. We will then be seeking to identify those who we'll invite for a second round interview. And if you make it to that stage, the odds are really rather good. We're looking to invite around 15 individuals. Amongst those, we'll be choosing the first and reserve interviews. Given the competition that there is for you, as well as the competition that there is for places at the bar, if you've made it to that stage, the chances are there will be a future for you at the bar, and that we would be hopeful of making an offer to you in due course, or we'd be hopeful in terms of you securing an offer somewhere at the bar in similar chambers. We will then move on to the offers being made on the 10th of May. Formally, you will have a week to make your decision. And again, the last minute tip applies. You will not be assisting your colleagues or chambers if you're lucky enough to have more than one offer at that stage if you leave it to the last minute. So again, by all means, think about it, but the sooner you can let everyone know your choice, the better. And then we move on to form, second criteria, what we're looking for. Two tips I can give you on that. The first is you get a clue as to what we're after from the actual contents. And there's the standard bar council entries boxes, but there are also 4 questions that we've added. One is, why do you believe that you would make a good barrister? 2 is, why do you want to join our chambers? 3 is, what practice areas are you interested in and why? And then 4, name a case which you view as wrongly decided and explain why. You get the glimpse of why it's not a good idea to leave this to the last minute. These are questions, tasks that will require some time and some thought. And we do have means of finding out whether you have spent the requisite time researching that, thinking about it, and giving us your considered view. The second clue you get is the criteria. You'll find those on our website, on the pupillage pages, and it may just be worth giving you a few guides, steers as to what we're looking for and how you can make sure that you assist us in giving you the requisite points, the requisite merit for your achievements. The first one is intellectual ability. There we're looking at a combination of your academic record. We'll be looking at your response to question 4. We'll also be looking to just take into account mitigating factors. But the key to take away is it's for you here to show us just what potential you have, what you can bring to the bar. And there are lots of ways of doing that. It isn't a matter of us just looking at your academic grade, although of course that is something that we look at. It's also a chance for you to show us that you have exceptional potential. If you have shown first-class ability in some of your subjects, let us know. If you've done non-academic things which show you to be an exceptional thinker, to be thorough, etc., this is your chance to advance that. Give us the example and explain for us why it shows that you merit high marks in this particular criteria. Second one is expressive ability. Key part of the job is persuasion. It's obviously difficult to form a particularly rounded view on the oral aspect on the form, but again, you can assist us. You can make the sifter as task much easier if you show us examples of where you have demonstrated oral expressive ability, written expressive ability. And then just as important, and this is perhaps the key message for this part, don't forget the form. Don't forget what it looks like. If you can structure the form, if you can complete it carefully, you can avoid the sort of typos, slips, etc. that come from a last-minute preparation, then so much the better. Remember the form, the boxes, they are very much your friend at this point in the sense that you can there set out, show us some of your ability and make the task of us in giving you marks easier. The third is interpersonal skills. Again, something that we will be looking at again as the process continues. But what we're looking there is, for example, of you having demonstrated cooperation, examples of you working with others. I think one particular thing to look for here is don't just set out particular stage marks in your career, particular posts you've held. Assist us also by explaining why this shows that you have demonstrated interpersonal skills. And this is a growing buzzword for us at the bar, but it's also important here. If you've demonstrated awareness, capacity to manage diverse individuals, interact with diverse clients, etc., this is the sort of evidence that we're looking for here. The fourth is commitment. I'm assuming that all of you have shown this to get this far in your academic careers and to be at this stage. Again, make our task easier by explaining how. Give us examples of where you have excelled. Explain to us how those examples fit into the overall picture of who you are and why you would make a good barrister. That leaves interest in one or more of the areas in which Chambers practices. And here we are assessing whether you've done your homework. There is a considerable amount of information about Chambers' work, about the areas that we practice in available in the public domain. You'll find it on our website. We're also looking whether you can demonstrate that your commitment has extended to any proactive steps. Tell us about experience you've had. That includes not just mini pupillage, that includes other chances that you've seized to explore, to gain an understanding of these areas of the law. Tell us about it, explain it, and again, this gives us a chance to give you requisite marks for that. One particular tip on that is through gritted teeth, we do realize that you're applying for more chambers than just us, but it will do your application no harm at all if you can tailor it as much as possible in this particular section for us to demonstrate that you have taken a really close look at us and that you're interested in joining these chambers in particular, and explain why. So those are the themes on the completion. I would just echo what Santosh said earlier. It is no disadvantage to be a mature applicant at the bar. In fact, you bring considerable expertise, another angle, ability to deal with people. Those sorts of aspects are worth setting out. I've been asked on previous occasions, is it a disadvantage if you're applying for a second or a third time? In my view, not at all. We're looking at each application each year afresh. In fact, in one view, it shows a considerable degree of resilience, but we recognize that there are a large number of applicants and that individuals may and can and should, if this is the career for them, have a second try, a third try if they wish. Again, this was highlighted by Vikram earlier. This is very much a middle distance run rather than a sprint. And in our experience, those who have the requisite skills and determination do make it to pupillage. So don't be put off at all by reapplying if required. And the third aspect, and this is one of the questions we had earlier, is do we look at applicants who are applying from outside the United Kingdom? Yes, we do. We're interested in you. If you're applying from outside the United Kingdom, there may be some research you wish to do on the Bar Council website in terms of sponsorship, the highly skilled migrant route. But what we're looking for is you. We recognize the bar needs to be as diverse as the people it serves, and that is not an aspect on which we discriminate. Ed.
Just before, just before Ed comes out, just to caveat slightly, Colin, what you said. Yeah. We do look at people from everywhere, but you have to be able to work and live in the UK. We're not able to support applications for people that don't have the right to work here and residency here. Sorry, Ed, just to make that clear.
Yes,
thanks.
yes.
Sorry.
And just so you've got the link for that, you'll see some guidance on sponsorship and the requirements on the Bar Council website.
Right. A few do's and don'ts or guides or tips on how you should approach the form. I would say treat it as an advocacy exercise. So the subject matter is essentially yourself, but you've got the criteria on our website. So empathize with the person that's marking the form. What we're looking to do is assess you against that criteria. So your answers to the questions should be trying to address that criteria. And you should be trying to persuade. Well, how do you persuade? Well, usually a good way to persuade people is to evidence what you're saying. So rather than just having bald assertions, what you need to do is draw upon your experiences and explain how and why they demonstrate the criteria that we're assessing against. So I would suggest focusing on the criteria in the first instance, and perhaps building a list of bullet points as to how your experience could be used to address each of those different criteria. And obviously there is a word count or character count in respect of each question. And so your resource is the word count or the character count. And ultimately it's an exercise in judgment as to what to include in each question and the order that you present those points, because you're trying to present them in the most persuasive way. And that involves exercising judgment as to which are the best points that you've got for each criteria or in answer to each question, and how you present those. So I would very much try and approach it as an advocacy exercise with the aim of persuading people. So you're trying to draw attention to relevant experience or achievements to demonstrate that you meet the criteria, but also empathizing with the person that's going to be assessing the form. You should try to ensure that it's clear and concise. So think about the way that you want to structure your answer, the way that you want the layout to be, because for example, if you just have one large block of text that is not structured in any clear way, it's perhaps less likely that somebody who's marking a number of forms is going to identify all of the salient points within that block of text. Whereas if you've structured it in such a way that it points more clearly to the points that are made within that prose, it's far more likely that they're going to register those points and pay heed to them. So it is really important that you start early. I would say write more than the character or word limit in the first instance, because the art of all writing is editing. And so you need to edit down, and I think that then forces you to choose, to when you exercise judgment about which are really the most important and persuasive points that you have in each place, because when you're editing and you've got more than the word limit and you want to get it down, it forces you into those decisions, and then hopefully it means that what you're left with is really good content, very persuasive content. And proofreading is critical, because we grow blind to all errors in our writing. We're all guilty of that. We all read a document the way that we intended it to be read, whether the words actually achieve that or not. So I would, if you're going to do it yourself, I think you need a period of grace before you start to look at it again. Maybe leave it for a week and then pick it up, or you need to enlist others. So friends and family, maybe you do an exchange with a friend and you proofread their form in exchange for them proofreading yours, and you'd be amazed how many errors you spot. But yeah, think about the layout and the structure, paragraph breaks, perhaps providing numbered lists where you want to draw upon more than one particular experience in response to a question. That is the way that you would try to structure a submission in court, or to try and persuade a judge. And there's no reason that you shouldn't do the same when you're answering a question, rather than just providing one block of text.
Brilliant. Is that, sorry, I interrupted Joe earlier when he was in the middle of chatting, was just having a pause. So I'm just wondering, is that a pause or is that an end point?
No, that's an end point, unless there's questions that people wish to ask.
We've got a question about how do you make your application stand out on paper? But I think the answer to that is do what you just said. Yeah, I mean, I think as Ed has just said in a number of different ways. Yeah, is there anything else that we need to just say to wrap up about anything in particular about interviews? Just wondering anything about the actual interview process. We've been asked about numbers of people that we invite to first round interviews, and the answer is it's not a set number, but it's roughly around 60 or so. And as a rough guide, that represents somewhere, depending on how many applicants we get, of between about 13-15% of our overall applications, but that's roughly what we do. As I said, not set in stone. But if there's nothing else in particular, I'm going to now move on to questions and predominantly go through questions that we've had. I don't know if that was it from you guys. Thank you ever so much. Which ends the sort of formal process of what we were going to do. Since you're also supervised, if you want to hang around for any other questions, I'd be really delighted. Otherwise, it's me on my own with a perhaps rapidly sinking ship. But I'm just going to send that question. It's roughly about 60 people. We've been asked anything that makes applicants stand out on paper. As I said, I think that's pretty much everything that Ed in particular has told you in his talk. Any advice you give to younger applicants? I think that is a really interesting one. We've talked a lot about not, and I think it's a really funny thing. We're keen not for people that have other life experiences and have been working for a long period of time or in different jobs, not to feel put off from making applications. And I think sometimes you're at risk then of over-emphasizing that. What advice would we give younger applicants? Exactly the same advice as we've given to all of our applicants so far. Don't be put off from applying, for heaven's sake, just because you're young. I mean, I suppose traditionally people come straight through university, law school and apply. So we rather gloss over reminding you not to be afraid to do that. And so I think that's a very helpful and wise comment. Any advice we'd give you? I suppose what I would say is have courage that just because you are younger, it doesn't mean you lack relevant experience or lack relevant answers to the questions that we have. As Ed and Colin were explaining, what we are looking for is evidence of your ability to meet our criteria. And we don't expect that evidence to be I've run a business and I'm a CEO of X and Y, your relevance can just as clearly be something you were doing at school or something you were doing at college. You know, the many people come straight through and are young, and that is just as relevant, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I wonder if Ed's paperwork advice could be transferred to that too, which is practice is a good idea, particularly if you're very young. Practicing an interview, having one of your friends, family pose some questions, giving you feedback on how you're doing is time very well spent, I think, for all applicants. And the other is if there is something in particular that you've always wanted to do, if you've got that year plan, etc., it's certainly not a disadvantage to do that first. The career at the bar will wait for you if there's that burning ambition that you haven't explored yet.
And don't be put off using the experience that you do have. I think sometimes perhaps people that have come straight from university and haven't you know, entered a full-time work environment yet might feel a bit apprehensive about putting part-time work on an application form, but actually there's no reason not to, because that's all relevant experience, and we're certainly not in this chambers going to be snobbish about any work experience that you do have. If it's relevant and it points to the criteria, it doesn't really matter that it was part-time whilst you were at school. You can still draw upon that experience, and you should.
Yes, exactly. So we've got a question: is it worth mentioning specific members of Chambers who've made certain points about Chambers practice in the application? I think the answer to that would be, I suspect you'll run out of space. So the word count is relatively tight and the questions asked are pretty broad. So there's no harm. I mean, if there's something that somebody said that's made you think this is why I want to come to this Chambers, there's no harm at all in explaining what that is. But we're not expecting you to be able to, you know, name all of us, or to be able to say it's not a requirement that you've attended this event. Obviously, all of you listening have attended this event, for which we're hugely grateful. But all the people that aren't here won't know, that it won't matter to them. You know, what we want to know is what you've got to say about yourself. So if there's something very specific that somebody has said that's resonated as to why you want to apply to us, by all means put it in. But I would think you probably won't have a lot of space, if that makes sense.
I mean, that ultimately comes back to the same point, which is that you've been given a limit in terms of the characters or the words, and it's an exercise of judgment of, is it sufficiently important to justify the amount of characters that it's going to require to explain?
Yeah, exactly. We have a question about, is accommodation made for applicants who are on the pre-bar course or still doing law conversion, so they don't have the same legal knowledge as other candidates if faced with legal questions in an interview? So I would say that the point is, what we want to hear is how you tackle things. You're not required to have an extensive background knowledge. The whole point is at an interview to be given a question. Either you're given something which contains everything you need to know in the time that you have. What we want to know is how you have a crack at answering things. So what's your thought process? How do you approach questions? And for lots of questions, there is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. It's not a legal test. It's not a knowledge test. It's an application test. I don't know, Colin, Ed, if you have anything else you want to say about that.
I agree. One of the most impressive interviews that I saw was of a candidate who got it completely wrong initially, recovered wonderfully during the interview, and showed all those skills in the recovery process. So again, we're looking for potentially and not for pre-knowledge.
And when we set the questions, we're mindful that we will have people that have done a conversion course, so we're not likely to pick an area that's going to unduly benefit somebody who's done a law degree in any event.
Yeah. We've got a question about bespoke pupillage to experienced candidates for areas focused on during pupillage year, tailored to the needs of the candidate's expected practice at the bar. So I suspect that's someone asking, you know, indirectly about themselves. No, we don't, for various reasons. Firstly, we have a broad 4-step pupillage, as we've explained. Each seat builds on itself. each seat builds one upon another. You do all 4 areas of practice. And one of the reasons for that is because we are a set that has so much to offer you couldn't possibly know what it is from the outside. The second is, it's really interesting, overwhelmingly, no, not overwhelmingly, that is hyperbole. It is not uncommon for pupils to arrive saying, I want to do law, and they end up doing law. They have a completely different practice in reality because either the legal aspect of something in the classroom and the practical aspect of something is completely different, or their skill set in terms of practical application lends itself to something else, or they enjoy something, or they do something. I mean, as Dan was talking about village greens, I mean, there's not a lot of that in bar school, but actually that's something he's found fascinating and practices in. There are so many opportunities, options, and types of work that you couldn't possibly know about without starting in pupillage. So no, we require all our pupils to do all 4 seats, and then hopefully that enables them both to have a broad learning, a good understanding of chambers, and then if they do, as some people do, then move into particular areas because they have particular expertise. A very common thing is people that have been doctors, for example, and then come into practice. That happens naturally and quite quickly afterwards. But you often find they'll then have, like Vikram, a broad practice that is partly related to previous work and partly something completely different. They were nodding around. Okay, I'm kind of have been asked to read the answers that I've typed because this is going to be recorded and given out later, which might be a bit tedious. So I'm going to wait until we have any other further questions before I do that, because everyone else might nod off. So next question, while demonstrating competency to align with the selection criteria, how far in time should the experiences or examples be mentioned from, or should they be fairly recent? Ed, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Well, I think it comes back to the same point, doesn't it? Which is that it's about exercising judgment about what is the most persuasive case that you can put forward. So I would have thought that if you, it's a sort of sliding scale depending upon how impressively it addresses the criteria and the distance in time. If I were to point to an example of when I was a toddler at nursery doing something, I dare say that might not be as persuasive as me pointing to a case that I did last year. But then equally, it might be that achievement a long time ago was far more impressive than what I did yesterday. And therefore it might be appropriate to do so. So I don't think that there is any sort of hard and fast rule that you shouldn't draw upon an example that is not recent. But I do think that that's part of the what you're doing, exercising judgment about how you can most persuade the reader that you meet that criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the answer is the more recent examples in your life are likely to be more relevant, but not in any way overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
So next question, would you recommend the case chosen for question 4 on the application form be a case in which a member of Chambers has acted? Okay, so the first answer to that is not unless you think it's the best case that you can choose. So we don't give points for toadying. And the prospect of your application being marked by the person you've referred to is not necessarily high. On the other hand, we're very blessed by the fact that we do have lots of members of Chambers who do act in all sorts of really, really interesting cases. And so if you think that that is the right case for you, then certainly don't be dissuaded from utilising it just because a member of Chambers is in it. What we won't do is get that person to ask you some really difficult question that you couldn't possibly know in order to catch you out, because that isn't what we do. What you should avoid, however, is what happened. It might be an apocryphal question, and it's going right back to when I was at university. I did a history degree, and there was Tudors were A level for pretty much everyone, as far as I can tell, for all time. And there was one very good book written by a chap called Red Green that was easy to read. He happened to be a professor at Lincoln College in Oxford, and somebody'd written their entire essay for their application by copying large chunks of his book. And when they were interviewed by him, he said, yes, that's great, but actually, if you're going to copy me, please at least get it right, because that's not what I said on that page. What I said was X. So if you are going to use a case chosen by members of Chambers, make sure that you're using it in the right way, for the application form being a case of interest rather than just churning out what somebody else has said. Right, anything else that you wanted to add to that? I'm sorry, I've digressed. It's getting late and I need more caffeine.
I suppose one tip to give is you're showing interest in the areas of law that Chambers specializes in. It doesn't mean you have to choose a case in that area, but you certainly make your points gathering exercise easier if you draw upon that aspect also.
Yes, that's fair enough. Okay, so next question. Is there anything you wish you saw more of in pupillage applications? Proofreading, probably. People, and I suppose going back to that, taking enough time to have given themselves enough time to put their best foot forward. I think what is slightly depressing is when you see people who've got good things to say, but have just ruined it by either missing bits out or not proofreading it. And the next question is, what's one red flag to avoid? Saying, I've always wanted to practice at Essex Court because blah, blah, blah. The red flag is to make sure that you are, and in a way, going back to what Colin was saying, aligning yourself to what Chambers here does. So if what you say, you know, is, I've always wanted to be a criminal practitioner because la, 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 and that's why I want to be at your Chambers, that would be a red flag. Make sure that you are fitting your application to us. Emily, you've just come online. You've got something excellent you want to add?
I was just going to jump in and say, having looked at other chambers and at a lot of pupillage applications over the years, my main tip linked to this question is that good advocacy is generally clear, straightforward advocacy. And as everybody said, form is a piece of advocacy. I've seen a lot of applications from people with incredibly good grades, brilliant experience, who seem to be using as many big words as possible. And from the point of view of most barristers, that's not great advocacy. So the more crystal clear you can make it, the more punchy and to the point your sentences can be, from my perspective, the better.
That's a really good point. So don't digress and waffle into really long anecdotes about random people. That would be another good tip. Kiara, what were you going to add?
Sorry, Emily. So I marked pupillage applications for the first time last year. And I think the thing that I wish I'd seen more of is people drawing out skills from non-law jobs. So I saw lots of people who would write sort of 3 paragraphs about a 2-day mini. And I know it's a 2-day mini because I can see the dates. And then writing, 2 sentences about a year when they worked at the co-op part-time during their studies. And I think that's a real shame because you will have gained plenty of skills that are applicable from those other jobs. So don't neglect them in the CV section. And as Ed was saying earlier, make it easy for your marker. Say, when I worked at the co-op, I interacted with members of the public, all the time. I'm good at dealing with people, including vulnerable people, elderly people, whatever it might be. So I've got client skills. Tell your marker that, but you will have relevant experience from other things, and don't deprioritize them just because it's not straightforwardly law.
No,
It's a balancing act.
Point, actually. Yeah, that is a good point. Sorry, Emily.
I was going to say that those bits on previous experience, whether it's non-law, law, mini pupillages, it's not an invitation just to list, which is what often people do, or list and then put something very neutral and factual. Went to court with so and so, or saw some cases about X, Y, and Z. What I want to know is, well, what did you conclude about why you would make a good barrister, why this Chambers would want you, what areas you're interested in and why, and what areas you're not interested in. So if you did a criminal mini and you're applying to 39 Essex, you're not interested in crime, you went and had a look, tell us what it was about it in a nice way that made you think that you're more suited for the sort of work we do and you'd enjoy that more. Every single bit of the form, apart from maybe the main biographical details, is an advocacy opportunity.
That's a good point. And I think Kiara's point is also really important. Don't be put off if you don't have lots of, I don't know, I've been to the court 100 times. Everyone can go to court at any time. So if you're interested in this job, you don't have to have lots of mini pupillages. You don't have to have, sat with a high court judge. You don't have to have done this, that, and the other. But you can go to court. You can sit in the back of any court and listen for a day and say, that's what I really like. This is what I thought was good. And don't be afraid of expressing, those examples. So we have another question, which is, I usually see tips about being original. How do you maintain formality while still showing your personality to stand out? Okay, so that is interesting. I think you probably have to think a little bit about, again, what your experience is that can show and align yourself to the criteria we're looking for. It's fair to say that on paper, it isn't very easy to show necessarily a dazzling personality and your people skills, but it is possible to show, as Chiara said, that you have people skills because of the way you dealt with complaints at the co-op. And it is possible to show, your personality by the things you've done or the choices you've made, and you're aligning that to what we're looking for. Oh, not sure that's a terribly helpful answer. Not sure if anybody else has got anything better to add.
I agree with all of that. I also think one of the key aspects here is to be yourself, rather than strive to be original. Show us who you are. Show us what qualities you bring to the bar. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all that we're looking for. And if you have particular aspects, particular interests which demonstrate the skills that it takes to succeed at the bar, I think that is the most useful channel for your original energies, certainly at the paper sift stage.
Yeah,
I think if the premise of the question is do you need to do something that's truly original and spectacular to stand out? I'm not sure that's correct, actually. I think, or perhaps just by having a really clearly worded, simply written and logically laid out, structured answer to a question, you will stand out and it will be quite original. Sometimes originality appears in a simple format.
Yeah, you certainly don't have to kind of try and produce a I don't know, a sort of legally blonde, fragrant CV or a video of you in various occupational whatevers to stand out. If you can answer the questions that we want with evidence, then
I used to mark exam papers, and people would say, "Oh, what's a first-class answer?" Just answer the question. Anybody who just answers the question simply in a logical structure, you'd be surprised how much that stands out against the other candidates that I'm marking.
And as Emily says, good advocacy is clear and says what we want to say on the packet. So hopefully that will be helpful. And you are all original. All of you are original. Everyone's different. So putting down your experience will make you original. Okay, next question. How would you recommend avoiding repetition in the preliminary parts of the form and then later in the longer answers? It seems that by fully describing your experiences and what you learned at the initial stage of the form would mean you would say the salient points you intend to make in answers to question 1 to 3, for example. Okay, so there is obviously a little bit of repetition when you have to put in the various formal details. But I think the longer answers, fully describing experiences, well, A, you will have quite a tight word count. B, if you are answering each question with the specificity that it is asking for, you will inevitably be answering in a different way because they are all slightly different questions. So I guess then also tailoring your answer so you don't repeat yourself endlessly. You don't have to use the full word count. Those would be my 3 tips.
This is a challenge we face every time we draft a skeleton, and we want to not just reproduce our pleadings, but also basically we said everything in the pleadings. How do you find something different to say? You just have to find something else. Those general questions 1 to 3, need to be more of a bringing everything together. You're not going to be reciting details about the minis you did, but there might be something particularly striking that you mention. They're more reflective answers, and the best answers I often see, rather than fact-packed answers.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So have we got any other questions, or shall I go back and read the answer I've answered? I'm thinking that's what I shall probably do. And then if anybody else answers the question, we can go with it. Right.
There's one new one at the bottom. Just popped up. There's just one new one at the bottom.
Oh, okay, one new one. You've got it under the wire. How do 39 approach the personal summary section of the form? Any tips on how best to use this? Well, someone else can answer that. Who wants to have a crack? Colin?
Yes, the idea is for you to tell us all the relevant material, if possible, in one place. If you've already covered it elsewhere, it doesn't need to reappear subsequently. Don't regard all the different word limits as your target. If you've put together what you need by the time you reach you've completed a particular section, that is also fine. And the personal summary section is really your starting point for that. It will do you no favors at all if there are points to be made, explanations to be made, if you include that particular material subsequently.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything? Okay, I'm going to go back to these answer questions then. So we had a question about door tenancy, whether we encourage it or not, how it works. To which the answer is we don't have a specific door tenancy policy. Any applications are considered by the management board on a case-by-case basis, but the door tenants that we have tend to be either retired members or academics. We were asked about our foreign offices, which chambers in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, and I think we answered that as we went along, but it was basically about whether people can take on work there and how many years call you'd be to be able to do that. And basically you can do that from the get-go. The work tends towards the more sort of commercial side, but it can be done from the earlier stages of tenancy. And we sometimes have relationships with interns in a legal firm as well. A mix of dead, which is a terrible phrase, and live work, whether it was 50-50 split, it really depends on the work you're doing at the time and with the supervisor that you have. I think I answered that as we went along. We also asked about our Manchester chambers and the opportunity to spend time in that office. So the Manchester office is basically a bit more of a post box type of office. We have a presence and rooms available to book, but it's not really a fully functioning office. You wouldn't really want to be somewhere, you wouldn't really want to be sort of based there. Most of our sort of northern tenants come down to London when they want an office environment and tend to use Manchester for conferences here in some post box. Okay, we were asked about recruiting from the UK. We've answered that a couple of times, and Colin's directed to the further information on the BSB website. Chiara was asked about the ICJ case she's working on, which she was happy to answer. It's application of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which is Gambia and Myanmar, that she's involved in. We were asked a couple of financial questions about rent and how that works effectively for tenants. And broadly, the answer is that we have a basic principle. There's a slight refinement for the highest earners, but rent and other expenses are calculated by for everybody on a specific percentage of receipts, so not billings but receipts on a month-by-month basis. So tenants who are starting out, or any other lower earner, or people that have had periods of parental leave or whatever it may be, they inevitably pay a lower amount of rent. We have specific policies for parental leave and so forth, and we're very much in line with other chambers. Our rent tends to cover pretty much everything. We don't have separate room rent. What I can say is nobody's ever failed to make it as a tenant here because they haven't been able to afford to practice. We're pretty flexible, and it is set up for you to succeed. Dan answered a question about members being encouraged to specialise as their practice develops. Now, it is perfectly possible to retain a broad practice in chambers, At the junior end, there's a lot of flexibility to develop your practice in the way you want. So if you want to keep it broad, it's possible. And that's certainly what quite a lot of people do. There's a lot of agency in how practice develops, although it's also fair to say that I think all of us have got areas of life where we've jumped off into particular areas of specialty simply because of the kinds of cases that we've had crossing our desk. Because frankly, the case that you get paid for tends to be the case you like the most. So inevitably, there can be an element of who it is that instructs you. But there is a lot of agency. And one of the great things about Chambers being so broad is that there are lots of different pies and pots for you to have a go at. Inevitably, people tend to become more specialist over time, but many of us still retain 2 or 3 areas of practice, which I think is quite unusual at the bar. So it's pretty much what suits you and your interests and needs. And you quite often find some people have a broad practice and then a little niche area that be left over from something they did a long time ago. Right, so if you've done a mini pupillage, we were asked a few years ago at 39, would this be considered as part of your pupillage application? Colin, Ed, you might want to jump in on the perhaps less perfect answer I gave, which was mini pupillage isn't determinative of a pupillage application. It can be used to support an application, and we consider it to bump up some applications, but it's never detrimental. But given that we've recently changed our mini pupillage provision, that is going to slightly alter over time. I don't know if either of you would want to say anything else about how we use mini pupillage.
I think you've accurately summarised the position.
Yay, good, thank you. Okay, on a related note to mini pupillages, given the diversity of our practice areas, do we prefer candidates who exhibit a broad array of interests across practice areas, or do we prefer candidates who have a specific interest? Now, in a way, oddly, we sort of answered this when we were asked about the bespoke pupillage, actually. But as I said, everyone's required to do all 4 of the Chambers areas: PET, Public, Civil and CNC. So you spend time in all 4 areas. Quite often people arrive with the belief that they want to work in one area, but they often end up working in other areas. So we don't prefer one type of candidate over another. Everyone has something different to contribute, so we look for the best candidates overall. Although, as we said earlier, if what you say is your passion is crime, then you probably aren't going to be applying here in the first place, or if you do, you might have got your application muddled. So what we're looking for are people that are interested in our areas, but are open to development. And most people we find that apply to us, it's one of the draws is the breadth of your pupillage to start off with. After pupillage, I was asked, could you realistically be based outside of London or the South? Because this person is very interested in the structured pupillage, which is great, but they probably want to drift back northwards at some point. To which I answered, lots of people live in lots of different places. You heard from Tor right at the beginning, she lives in Devon. And it's difficult to give a clear answer because it does depend slightly on how your practice develops and where you go. But we've got members living in Wales, all over the place. Many people live outside London and Devon, etc. Emily Wilson rightly said it's worth bearing in mind in the early years of practice, there's often lots of travel to courts, and primarily that'll be based in London and around with locations area. People tend to be in London and the southeast. But junior tenants go all over England and Wales for hearing. So on the one hand, that might tend you to think you want to be in London. On the other hand, it might make being out of London a bit more attractive. Certainly, lots of people live all over the place, and that doesn't matter. Somebody else asked about a 2-2 degree. They had a 2-2 degree at undergrad with relevant mitigating circumstances and supporting evidence. They then got a distinction in a master's degree and a distinction in GDL and very competent. And they wanted to know our approach to applicants. So as I said, it's difficult to talk about any particular application because everything is looked at on its own basis, and all applications are marked by at least 2 people and cross-marked. But we consider mitigating circumstances where relevant as part of our criteria, and we do consider each application on its own merit with specific ways to consider and take into account mitigating circumstances. So while I can't answer that specific question of how that person would do, they certainly shouldn't be put off applying.
I can just chirp
please.
in at that point as well and say that I can recall a specific candidate last year that we invited to first round interview who'd had a similar sort of experience of, in their minds, underperforming or getting grades that didn't reflect their true ability at undergraduate stage because of particular reasons that they explained within the form, and we took that into account, and they performed very well at first round interview. So don't be put off applying because of that. Just explain what the circumstances are.
Real life example, that's what we like. Okay, so the next question was about a developing practice, and does Chambers support members working in other offices, but also, for example, at the Northern Irish Bar, which I said we've got lots of people who are called in international bars in various jurisdictions, a number of them in Northern Ireland, but also Gibraltar and lots of places all over the place. So it's perfectly possible to do that. How many do we typically invite to the first round interviews? So I said we don't have a particularly set number. It's generally around 60, which is depending on how many applications we have, will depend on that sort of percentage, but it's generally around sort of 13, 15, 16% of our applicants get around to the first round. It's about 60 people. And as Colin said, we then generally have about 12 for the second round. Okay, if you didn't practice at 39, what is something you'd missed about the environment and culture of Chambers if you were forced to move elsewhere? That's a good question. Okay, so Chiara answered, and Emily, and then I'm going to ask Colin and Ed, because this is our last written question. So Chiara said, others may want to chip in, but certainly for me, it's how genuinely friendly and social Chambers is. I have friends at other chambers which are great, but truly nowhere near as friendly and active, such as monthly Chambers lunches, Friday drinks in the Clerk's Room, informal social events like her floor of the building has a dinner. Oh, I feel a bit left out. I wasn't in that, but I'm not on her floor. As you're self-employed as a tenant and doing your own work most of the time, it's easy to become isolated, but 39 is great at connecting you with others in Chambers and feeling part of the whole. This is great for well-being, but also for your practice. As I mentioned, people are very willing to help and give advice when needed. Emily Wilson said, all of this plus the views from the 5th floor. Right, I'm going to let Colin and Ed answer that while I just check whether there are any other questions.
Yes, I mean, I've been in Chambers long enough to remember the phrase. It's called the Garden Court spirit, from the time when this Chambers was in an annex in Garden Court of 10 to 15 members, everybody knowing what everybody else was up to and everybody supporting each other. And it's remarkable in the time that I've been in these chambers, joined when we were 30 odd, we're now 200 odd, how that spirit has stayed, and how across Chambers, behind every door, there is a supportive individual who will listen to your queries, who will give you advice, and who is willing you to succeed. I think that's a particular aspect of life in these chambers that I've missed.
Well, I didn't do pupillage in Chambers. I was a lateral hire, and before I joined, I joined primarily because I thought it'd be good for my career, because I'd get better work and I'd earn more money. But I was a bit apprehensive about the size of Chambers, and I wondered whether, because it was quite a high-profile Chambers with lots of very successful people, I wondered whether it would be as friendly as the Chambers I'd come from. But actually, I was very surprised on both respects, actually, that although it's quite a large Chambers, it feels quite intimate. And I think that's because of the connections that people have, because it's just such a friendly Chambers where everyone's happy to, extend time to you to assist with something or to have a chat. So, yeah, that's, I think really friendliness.
Okay, so funnily enough, Colin, I'm old enough to remember Garden Court, as in, before I came to the bar, as I witted on right at the beginning, I worked quite a while. And I first came to Chambers, in fact, just before it left Garden Court. And then over Christmas that was. And then they were turfing out, this is before I'd done a law degree, so I was literally a hanger-on. And then they basically were in the Edgar Wallace, which is a local pub, because the Chambers was being moved, and then first moved into 39. So I slightly straddled that, but not as a lawyer, as I came and did some bit of mini pupillage and then a bit of legal research. And for me, having worked for 2 or 3 years, I couldn't believe how not only nice people were, but what kind of real and rounded people they were. So doing lots of amazing work, which at the time I didn't really recognise because I didn't know much about law, but certainly as really attractively generous, spirited people with lots of interests and things that made you want to chat and be part of them. And that's never diminished for me. I mean, I then had to go off and learn to be a lawyer and then come back and do my pupillage. And then, in fact, I didn't get taken on at Chambers. I had to go and work in the wilderness for a few years before I finally persuaded 39 to offer me a home, which I came back in 2010. And throughout all that time, there's been many people that have come and gone, but that core essence remains the same. And it's very common sense as well. I think what I also really like about Chambers is it's sensible, it's kind, it's generous-hearted, and it's very friendly. And I think to all of you listening, I hope that what we have showed you today is a little bit of that, and hopefully helped all of you on your next step in your choice of career, whether you do end up applying here or not, and whether you get through the process, and it is tough or not. Hopefully that you had a bit of support from us and a bit of explanation to ease your path, and I think we just wish you all sorts of luck and with your venture, and if it brings you to our door, all the better. I can see there were 2 more questions that have popped in about the application form, so we'll just deal with those before we wrap up. We're slightly over time now, so let's wrap up after that. They're all about the question 4 questions, and Colin, I'm going to ask you to deal with them, and perhaps we can wrap them all up in one go. So the first is about did we answer the personal summary question? We did answer that, didn't we? Okay, so this is question 4. When deciding on your case for question 4, should it be recent or older? And when answering that question, should the arguments be only made on the basis of law and precedent, or can you also rely on words of authoritative scholars looking at social and political aspects of law? And is the question about you least agreeing with, what is it testing? Do you expect to see reasoning or personal opinions? And can it be from any area we cover, or could it also be something like a civil or a criminal case? There you are, Colin. Tell us about
really interesting. Yes, very good questions. First of all, I don't mind whatever case it is, however old it is. If it's well established and wrong, tell us why. What we're testing is intellectual ability, expressive ability, and I suppose if it's a chance to show an interest in areas in law that we do. In terms of how you argue matters, do remember that we're looking for your thoughts, your ability, your reasoning process. So if you are citing someone else's thoughts, in a way you're missing a bit of the chance to show us your thinking. But if you want to demonstrate that you've researched this, that somebody else's views have influenced you, you're interested in them, then of course there's nothing wrong with adding that in.
Brilliant. Ed, anything you wanted to add?
No. In terms of what we're assessing, the criteria are on the website, and Colin summarised them. So you should be thinking about each question, which of those criteria are engaged by that question.
Okay. On which happy note, I hope we've answered your question. And those of you that are still with us, thank you for sticking to the end. And goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.